Good afternoon. Would you please join me in a moment of silence for the Parkland community? Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's move on now to our public comments. Mr. Doyle.
We have no public commenters this afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, then, we'll move on to the approval of minutes from the January 25th, 2018 board meeting and the February 9th, 2018 called meeting. If there are no objections to approval, they are approved. Okay. Now we're ready to hear board business. Let's begin with, we have a board meeting date change, July 26th, 2018, changed to July 19th, 2018, without objections. We good with that? Mr. Morgan?
Yes, very much so, Mr. Chair. Will you elaborate as to why we are changing that?
Yeah, I can handle that one. So the date change is required due to the budget, and basically it's so that we can get the budget approved and get the millage rate and get all of the get the approved millage rate to the commissioners, and then all of the ancillary budgetary processes where we have to have the required meetings. So it just worked for us just to move the board meeting back a week. And I'll let Brad Johnson, if any other details are needed, I'll let him answer that.
Okay. I guess we're good with that then? That date change? All right. Next thing is board member appointments to the F&T Citizens Oversight Committee. Mr. Ragsdale, you have one for that, I believe?
Yes, mine's going to remain unchanged. It'll be John Loud.
Thank you. Anyone else with an update on that? I guess not. Okay, Mr. Ragsdale, we are now ready for your report.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I've added, in light of the tragic events in Parkland with the high school shooting, I've added a school safety update to this agenda, and I will attempt to do the same report again tonight. But I've received several emails from concerned parents. Obviously, as a parent, when something like this happens, you immediately go to thinking about your kids and the safety of your kids. And I want to reiterate, as we have mentioned and said before, that our student and staff safety is the top priority in the Cobb County School District. That has not changed, and we're unwavering in having that as our top priority. That said, when an event like this happens, it should at least cause everyone in a position that has any kind of company building, whether it be public, private, or otherwise, it should cause you to reevaluate your protocols to make sure that you have, number one, the correct protocols in place, and number two, evaluate those protocols to see if, in fact, you can learn something from an event like this that you need to change. So we are absolutely going to be reevaluating those protocols. It's something that we do ongoing, but it's I do want to take this opportunity to kind of highlight some of the things that we already had in place. And as recently as this past January, just about 3 weeks ago, we did have a school safety and emergency preparedness principals meeting to where we had our public safety department, which again, we should be very, very proud of. We probably have, and I don't have this, I always use this anecdotal example. I don't know if it's empirical yet or not, but I'm just going to say that we've got the largest public school police force in the state. And I want to also say how much we appreciate them, but also point out that they are post-certified police officers, which means they go through the same approval and certification process as Cobb PD and all other state-approved police officers. So the training is exemplary and also their professionalism. So I can't say enough about our police force. Public safety did conduct this training, and obviously we're not going to go into detail about a lot of the things that were discussed, but I wanted to take this opportunity in order to update the parents in our community and students, as I got an email from a student as well today, on what we are doing, and it's a continual process. And our parents and students and community alike need to rest assured, and that's very easy to say. And after an event like this, it's very hard to really grasp that we are taking student and staff safety as the top priority. Some of the things that were covered in this training, classroom door security, for example, something as simple as that. But when we conduct a code red drill, which all of our schools are required to do once every semester, 2 times a year. And so when those code red drills are conducted, it's a means of not only training, but also learning. Because obviously, a locked door is the first means of security for keeping our staff and students safe. So if something is prohibiting that door from being locked, we definitely want to know that, and we want to identify that and rectify that so that we can make sure that we have the most basic of safety procedures in place. The other issue is, and this came up as security has changed, is all of the classrooms being marked from the outside so that it's visible to first responders. Because obviously when first responders show up on our campus, when we show up on some of our campuses, we wouldn't know where to go if it was, classroom 303. And having those markings on the outside of our classrooms certainly benefit first responders. Having floor plans in the proper locations and easily accessible and clearly annotated. And then the code red and code yellow drill procedures. One of the things that we are implementing as we speak is an unannounced code red drill. And what I mean by that is public safety is going to show up on a campus and say, you're in code red, issue it, and then they are actually going to assess and analyze what that process produces. Are the staff members clearly trained and understanding exactly what to do? Do the students understand what to do? And we'll get to a video in a second, and I'll remind the board of the alert point system that we're in the process of completing in our high schools this year. That obviously changes the game for Cobb County School District, because the communication of what code is being issued. Obviously, some things were learned immediately from this tragic event in Parkland, that causes us to re-examine some of our protocols and make sure that we have the best communicated protocols in place that we possibly can. Again, we'll be getting to that video in a little bit. But I want to say again about the unannounced code red drills. When a school goes through this, it is absolutely going to be uncomfortable for that school, because number one, it's a code red. Okay, there is no more uncomfortable situation or situational environment in a school than a code red. So, and especially it being unannounced. It's one thing to have a code red drill, and those are very important because it allows us to practice and train. Because, everyone's familiar with the old adage about practice makes perfect, and that's not true. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So if you don't take seriously the practice of a code red drill, then you're not going to be able to exhibit those skills needed, God forbid, should a situation arise. So we take that very seriously. We understand and we'll communicate to the principals that this is going to be an uncomfortable situation when that happens in your school, but it's absolutely necessary, as we have seen yesterday. Unfortunately, high school campuses are probably one of the most open campuses of any school district in any state, and you have to take different precautionary methods to make sure your staff and students are safe, and that's going to differ by campus because obviously we know that each campus layout is very different. Some of the emails I've received center around threats and, being able to identify those threats and what do you do, when a threat occurs. We take very seriously those threats. Again, our PD, our officers are quick to respond to those threats, whether it be verbal or whether it be, unfortunately, social media has brought about, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, more negatives than positives. And social media seems to be the platform now for bragging and those kind of things. So when those types of threats occur, we very seriously take those into consideration. And while we cannot say that this is going to result in every situation, certainly a number of those will result in arrests because the threat is a very serious crime, and we treat those as serious crimes. Also, we're going to be doing not only the unannounced code red drills, but we're also going to be doing unannounced suspicious persons kind of, it's not a drill, but a situational awareness exercise to where we have a plainclothes policeman enter a school campus and see exactly how deep they can get before being challenged by an employee. And challenged meaning, can I help you? What's your business here at the school? And then escorting them to the appropriate location. Obviously, we've taken many precautionary methods at elementary and middle schools to where we have access control and we have all exterior doors locked, and you have to be buzzed into the front door at all middle and elementary schools during the day. That's obviously much more difficult to attain at the high schools with it being such an open campus. However, that being said, we do have multiple high schools, and obviously we're not going to list the ones that do and do not have this, that you have to be buzzed into the school to where it is very secure. And quite honestly, what contributes to the inconsistency of that situation between campuses is the campus layout. Some schools are just situated in a much better situation to be secured. They're under one roof, et cetera, et cetera. External standalone buildings are limited. So we do take those things into consideration. Probably one of the most important things that we have, and the conversation around anecdotal versus empirical data always comes up when you're talking about being able to show benefits or be able to show proof of what you're doing or what you're not doing, how you improve, what steps you need to take to improve. One of the most important things that we have is the evaluation form after a code red drill, an unannounced drill, to where the public safety officers of our district, they fill out that form for the information and instruction to the principal. So that principal can then get with employees and get with students to let them know where they need to tighten up things. It gives the ability for feedback from public safety to the school in things like, was the staff understandable of what's going on, of what the procedures were when a code red was initiated, how long it took for the organized protocols to be exhibited and implemented in a code red situation. And again, it's not going to be one of those situations, unfortunately, where you're given a pop quiz and you make 100. I can guarantee you that no school is going to make 100, and that's just because there's always room for improvement, and that's going to be the task of our public safety officers to identify those areas that need improvement, identify those areas that need immediate attention and improvement. So that being said, as tragic as the events in Parkland are, and as well as every other school tragedy that takes place, in Cobb, we're certainly not immune and to any of these events. It's not saying that those events cannot happen in Cobb. But I think the message, both to our parents, to our students, to our community, to our staff members, is that we do take very seriously, just with our mission. The mission is not just words on a board, words on a card. We live it. When we say that staff and student safety is the utmost priority in Cobb County School District, we mean it and we live it. And some of those examples I've already mentioned, but I think it is a point to be made that we are doing, in my opinion, many more measures that we have in place than any other school district. I will go on the record as saying that because I know what we have put in place. I know that how many officers we have. I know the training they have. I know the equipment they have. So definitely it is not a let's rest on our laurels kind of situation to where, hey, we're good. We've got this and this and this. And obviously we limit the conversation around exactly what protocols we have in place. But certainly we have to be very cognizant of the fact that it is right near impossible to prevent a person from coming on the campus intending to do harm. What we have to be able to answer is, have we put in place all of the options that we possibly can to ensure the safety and security of our staff and students should somebody come on the campus intending to do harm or ill will? And that answer is always going to be, yes, we are, but. And the but is we can always continually improve because, again, it's all about training. We have to know that, and it's very difficult to grab hold of this concept because when you have a situation that happens in a school, again, we've talked about the safety of our students with the stop arm on the buses. Over 75,000 students ride the bus to and from school each and every day. And it's our job to ensure the safety. And the stop arm and the violations and the system we have in place is a way that we're able to enhance the possibility of safety occurring on every one of our buses for every one of those over 75,000 students. That being said, we can always improve. And that's our job, is to always be cognizant of what our environment is, what's going on in the environment, making sure that we have the appropriate relationships in place between not just school district and our public safety, but public safety of the school district and the county and the municipalities, because God forbid an event like this happen, you've got to have everybody working in harmony to make sure that everybody remains as safe as humanly possible. And that's some of the things that I've mentioned, making sure that first responders understand exactly what's going on, where the situation is, and how to get there in the most expedient manner possible. And we're going to end with the video, but I do want to say that the alert point system that we're very close to being concluded with high schools. I'm not going to tell you how many we've got or how many we've got left. But that system, and you'll see me in the video, that's the Kennesaw Mountain. I will say that because it's going to be obvious that's who that is. But they were the first school, one of the proof of concept schools. And I'll remind you that when we first showed this video back last August, this was a proof of concept. It's no longer a proof of concept. It is in implementation. We are still making tweaks to the system. As you'll hear me say, I've asked for direct feedback from teachers and staff and any staff and our employees. And so with that, I do want to say this is an example of how we put our money where our mouth is. We say we take safety and security seriously. This is an example of how we're trying to secure one of the most honestly difficult situations to secure is the high school campus, and this is just an example of how we're attempting to be able to do that. I will say again, and I'll repeat myself, while it is close to impossible to actually prevent an event like this from happening, you want to make sure that your training is such that you can prevent any students from encountering ill will and danger, and that's what we've got to make sure that we're prepared for, and that's what we have to continually keep our eye on the ball to make sure that we don't misstep, and that as we get, obviously this will be a district-wide implementation at some point in time. I'm not going to say what the time frame is again, but it is something that we take very seriously. And I'll be happy to answer any questions after video, if we can go ahead and roll the video.
Before teachers can begin to teach, before students can begin to learn, they all have to feel safe.
If the teaching staff or the kids do not feel safe or secure in the school environment while they're here, they're not going to fully be able to learn everything that we're trying to teach them.
The Cobb County School District has not only trained its staff on safety measures, it is working to empower them too.
I appreciate you guys taking your time to go through this training.
Kennesaw Mountain High School and Bells Ferry Elementary are two proof-of-concept schools for a system called Alert Point, a crisis alert system.
I think one of the big things we're very excited about is the fact that by having each teacher with access to the system is going to increase the speed at which we can respond to any type of situation in the school.
As the staff at Kennesaw Mountain learned during training, the technology-based system is patterned after the school fire alarm systems.
It's been over 70 years since there's been a death because of a school fire. But that is really because of the communication, the processes, the systems in place. If a fire happens inside a school, everyone knows you quick hit a button. And everyone else knows, hey, when that starts going off with the sound, with the lights, you get out of the building.
Under Alert Point, employees can activate the system.
It can quickly, as you see, immediately go into a lockdown or a code red and notify all building occupants.
Not only do you have the flashing light, you have the beeps to get your attention. They got the flashing lights. The color code dictates what kind of code it is. And on a code red, it's lockdown, immediate danger, locks, lights, out of sight.
It is a way to draw immediate attention to an emergency.
That there's an issue that needs to be dealt with. We're talking medical alert, or if there's some sort of confrontation or altercation or a security issue. The activation will, in fact, within 5 seconds, come up on the board. So, and there you go, staff member number 1.
The person's location shows up on a monitor of the school's floor plan in the front office. It is also immediately displayed on the computers and mobile devices of administrators and police officers both in the building and throughout the district.
D has activated the alert. The alert comes up on the phone, so you just touch this and up it shows with a little red dot where in the building she is.
Anywhere on a school campus.
You're in a hallway, you're in a cafeteria, you're outside, you're at the tennis courts, the track, the football field, in between. It starts to get that attention right away and get responders on their way to you.
Here is a demonstration at Bells Ferry. When the button is activated,
Code red. Total school lockdown.
staff
Immediate
members
danger.
know what to do.
Locks, lights, out of sight. Code red. Total school lockdown.
This alert system here, they welcome it. They feel so much more secure.
Those testing Alert Point believe it offers help.
A quick response,
Right.
immediate response.
The staffs at Kennesaw Mountain and Bells Ferry will learn exactly how it works.
I want to hear feedback. If you want to shoot me an email directly, by all means, shoot me an email.
Safety is the district's #1 priority.
So, again, there will definitely be some that try to take advantage of tragic events like this, and we can't do anything about those types of individuals. But we can't say anything about those types of individuals, at least not on TV and when the press is in the room. But I will say again to our parents, to our staff, to our students, and to our community that staff and student safety is our top priority. Obviously, there are protocols that we can't talk about due to they are safety protocols, and we don't want those to be widely known. But the codes, we have the ability to customize those such that when I referenced being able to learn from events and be able to reanalyze your protocols and see if you need to tweak those protocols, that will allow us to do that. And obviously, we will be doing that in the coming weeks and months. We will also be updating our active shooter video, which we had a pretty big press splash when we did that 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And so we'll be updating that to reflect at the high schools the new system that we have in place, and then at the middle and elementaries as that is rolled out. One thing I'll also mention is I mentioned about during a code red drill about the locks on the doors being activated. One of the projects that we have in Splost 5 is actually a rekeying of every school. That's obviously a significant expense, but we felt like, again, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and that is rekeying every school will ensure that we have the appropriate type of locking mechanism everywhere is needed, and the appropriate access is granted to those needing it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So all of that being said, there's no way to truly, put parents at ease. All of us that are parents know, there's a degree of comfort you can get to, but you're never really 100% there because of these type of events that seem to continuously happen. So all of that being said, I did want to provide, again, the community and our staff and students and board with an update of what we are doing, what we can talk about, what we're doing with school safety as in regards to how it pertains to all sites within the Cobb County school system. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know this was unplanned, but considering the events, I felt it was important to provide an update.
Timely information, Mr. Ragsdale. You want to go ahead with Mr. Morgan?
I think the time was, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really appropriate for you to thoroughly go through that, Chris, and what's moving forward. A couple of questions I had, you answered actually as you were talking. School A, the evaluation, miserably failed it. We doing it again, or because I know you said is it twice?
Well, now, the twice a year is the required code red drills that it's up to the school to determine date and time and all of that good stuff. The unannounced code red drill is when public safety just shows up at a school and says you're in a code red, and then does the analysis and kind of the evaluation form that I mentioned that you're referring to.
Yeah, we miserably failed it. School X miserably failed it. Then what?
First of all, that's not going to be a good day. If someone miserably fails it, because that would indicate that the appropriate level of attention has not been provided to what they have been trained on. All that being said, it's kind of going to basically be like when you go into a restaurant and you look at that grade that they've received. Are you going to go back to that restaurant if they're at a 70? Exactly, you're not. So, and then the inspector is going to be back, and that restaurant is wanting that inspector to be back as soon as possible to get that grade up. Same kind of thing. When the evaluation is given to the school, the assistant superintendent is going to be involved in that process, and the recommendations, some will be immediate, some will be, hey, you need to adjust these for the next code red drill, and that will determine how quickly they need to come back. So that being said, it's not going to be unannounced code red drill. School is and I'm going to just say I don't anticipate any of our schools to fail miserably, but assuming that they don't get a great evaluation, it's not going to be that the school can rest on its laurels knowing that we've got 111 other schools to take care of. We'll be back, and again that assistant superintendent's going to be involved, and so the appropriate attention is going to be applied. So because the parents need to know that we have performed this evaluation and conducted the analysis and understand that the school is in good standing with that. We're not going to post a grade on the front window, but the principal will be very much made aware of what that is and what they need to do to improve.
Mr. Scamhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in support of what Mr. Ragsdale's saying, I've at the proof of concept at Kennesaw Mountain High School, went out and watched them with that system. And I'll say this: the system's not, the end all to whatever, but it's going to help with any possibilities where other schools or other districts don't have this system. And the other thing is. Our teachers are not in the military, and they are not trained for multiple hostile threats. So when we're inspecting and checking out and all that, I think they need to be prepared. We need to do what we can. But we may have to double their salary if they're going to go to that kind of level of anticipation. But I just wanted to emphasize that the system that we put in the schools are going to really help, where other school districts will probably be visiting us pretty quick now to see how it works and how it's going to help. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add to that, I appreciate you saying that, because hindsight's always 20/20. It just so happened we wanted to pick Kennesaw Mountain because it was a multi-story building. So we wanted to get a good idea about how that system worked in that environment. But they also did not have the voice over IP system installed yet. I believe they are now done. I think they were completed either last week or week before. That also improves, because obviously with voice over IP comes a phone in every classroom. So that communication is even further enhanced through that system. So, and I'm glad you said this as well. It's not the end all be all. There is not there is not a magic recipe for success in any of these. What we have to do is just make sure that we've prepared as much as possible for this type of event, such that God forbid that it actually happens. And I think a good example of that was when the active shooter situation happened over at the Penske truck rental in Kennesaw. You saw law enforcement from all over Cobb County and the state, including State Patrol, come down on that facility. And so that's the same type of response that would happen in an active shooter situation or a tragic event in a school. So, yeah, you're right. And again, I go back to, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So making sure that we pay close attention to those code red drills, we learn as much as possible from those drills, and the level of seriousness is applied when those drills take place. Because again, if you don't apply the right discipline and the right attitude toward a drill and practice, when the real thing comes to town, it's difficult to make sure everybody's hitting on all eight. So that's why we wanted to, again, do an update for the community, but also for the board to let you guys know that, we are putting our money where our mouth is, and that is the top priority for our school district, is the staff and student safety.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you very much for those comments. Very appropriate. This subject hits pretty close to home. I had an uncle a number of years ago who was shot and killed in a classroom. A student, disgruntled student, pulled the gun and shot him, and then he killed himself. So with regard to the systems that we have at the responses, do any of those like detect an acoustical signature of a gunshot? Like, for example, yesterday, one of the things we heard was, there was confusion about balloons being popped versus gunshot. Now, those are two distinctive sounds. And and I'm just thinking of any way that we can to get even a little bit of an advantage. That's question number one. And then question number two is, once an intruder's in the building, obviously safety is paramount, is the ability to secure each and every room. And I know that it's going to differ widely among schools. Some may not have locks, some may have locks. And if they don't have locks, what do they have or what can they get? Because in many instances, I think it's going to be critical to exercise the greatest amount of safety is that we take a look at seeing what we can do to be able to allow people to secure doors to, give them more time. So those are my questions.
So first question, no, it does not have an acoustical piece that would detect gunshots. But the flip side of that coin is what this particular system does. It puts in the hands of every single badged employee on that campus the ability to issue a code red. And the reason I draw that to the attention, and I'm not giving away any secret, but the closer you are to where the event is happening in an active shooter, the closer you are to the shooter, the more apt you're going to be able to more accurately issue that code red. You know exactly what's going on. Where versus, 10 rooms down the hall, you may perceive that as a balloon pop kind of thing. So the closer you are to the event happening, the more accurate that reporting it can be. The other thing, too, that we have, I'm not going to go into details of it, is the ability to real-time communicate with those badged employees. That is very critical. And the reason I draw your attention to that and make that deliberate statement is, as you very well know, in a school, getting cell phone connectivity is right near impossible. Now that we have Wi-Fi calling capabilities on cell phones, that's certainly more readily available and functional. But being able to have that communication occur without the reliance on cell phone signal or landline signal, et cetera, that's paramount to getting that communication to the right people at the right time in the most expedient manner possible. The other issue that we have, not issue, but the other benefit that we have is the ability for first responders, our first responders, to see on the floor plan exactly where events are taking place, such that, as you see when on the floor plan, it shows up who it is and where they are that has initiated that help request. As people go through that floor plan, if multiple people are clicking help, you can see that something's going on in a particular wing, and it gives first responders the opportunity to make the most expedient manner possible to get to the point where they're most needed. We're talking about active shooter. That goes with a medical emergency. We had at Osborne, I can't say enough about Josh Moriel, the principal there, who conducted CPR on a student that had a medical emergency. And because he was able to do, it's got nothing to do with the system, but I can't say this without saying, what he was able to do. He was able to, by doing CPR, keep that oxygen flowing and minimize any kind of brain damage and that kind of thing. We're still hoping for a full recovery and still waiting to get status on that particular student. But that being said, in a medical emergency, the quicker and more accurate the information for a first responder, a paramedic, EMT, the more readily they're going to be able to get there and assist. So being able to have accurate pinpoint information, I just can't say enough about, and immediate. Our officers are on the same radio system as Cobb PD and first responders. So being able to have our officers have access on their phone to that floor plan and who's requesting help, what kind of help, and where they are, they can immediately convey that information to 911 and the first responders coming to assist. So I do a pitiful job of remembering multiple questions. So what was your second question?
Second question had to do with barriers in locking doors.
That's right. I remember now, of course. So as I mentioned, Splost 5, we have a rekeying project in there. Every classroom door has a lock. That's part of construction design, and the type of lock is dictated by fire code. Fire code dictates that you cannot have to do multiple steps to exit a classroom. So you have to be able to turn that doorknob and that door open regardless if it's locked or not. So for that reason, most locks, they're not deadbolt at all. They're locked with key. All right. And so when that's locked, you can't access it from outside the classroom, but from inside the classroom, you just turn the knob and open the door. So unfortunately, what we have in some cases is keys that are gone. And so then that teacher does not have the ability to lock that door or unlock the door, as the case may be. So that's one thing that we'll be rectifying. And there are a lot of different, semi-solutions out there for that type of event because you have different types of doors, right, and cafeteria and those kind of things. So those are things that we're looking at. But in a classroom, there's a lot of situations to where like a magnet is placed on the lock where it keeps the door open all the time, that kind of thing. We don't use those nor encourage those at all, just because, when the event comes to town, your training's got to kick in, and pulling a magnet off the door sometimes may not be part of that training. So all of that being said, we do have the necessary funding opportunities in place through Splost that we will be looking to do that district-wide initiative quickly.
I can't imagine what the cost would be, but when you talk about magnets, there are in kind of that one-step exit is that there are magnetic locks that rely on motion, so there's no action. So if somebody's egressing, that they basically come up, that magnetic lock is released, and then they could actually exit. I can imagine that's a very pricey thing, but I can imagine in a code red situation where, literally the code red goes off and every one of those magnets is activated. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and that's really the way the access control works. It's generally a magnet. Sometimes it's a striker, but yeah, the expense is quite substantial. Regardless of what path we go toward rekeying, it's multiple millions of dollars. Obviously, we've got, you figure we've got 8,000 classrooms, give or take. So, and that does not obviously include offices and front doors and those kind of things. So, but that's, again, a benefit of Splost. If it wasn't for Splost, we would not be able to even entertain doing something on that large of scale. So we are investigating access control. Obviously, that becomes cost prohibitive somewhat when you talk about student, kind of badges kind of thing. So we are investigating all possible options, though, because, again, the high school campus is one of those situations that's the most difficult to secure. Now, I will say, too, that I failed to mention, I remember I mentioned it last time, another benefit is that this system is independently powered, so that when the power goes out, this system still works, the alert point system. The other benefit of this that was just hugely attractive is twofold. One, it's visible. So you saw the hub that actually flashes LED. We can create our own colors if need be, but that visible notification is key to getting students and staff to immediately and more readily know what to do. Secondly, you heard Dean Oles, the CEO there, he talking about being at the tennis court, being on the football field. We've actually put together the solution such that it's again independently powered, not to give away any of the secrets, but it picks up anywhere on the campus meaning property lines. So if you're on the football field, if you're on the track, if you're in the field house, you don't have to have Wi-Fi access. It's going to pick up that badge for the help signal that's desired.
Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something like the situation that's happened in not only in Florida but other school districts in the past heightens our awareness of how vulnerable we really are. I'd like to add a couple more things to be considered, and they may already be considered. One is our resource officers' interaction with our students. Our students need to feel that they can come to a resource officer when they see something that's not right or they got a concern about something without recrimination. If they're wrong, they're wrong, but let's err on the side of caution. The other area I would like to get involved is the school community. When they see something that doesn't look right or they have a concern about it, they need to be able to come to the principal or secretary or front office or somebody and say something so that they can take some action if need be. Right now, our community, I think, kind of feels like we ought to be doing, or the school district ought to be doing everything, but the community needs to be involved in it also. That when they see something that doesn't look right, don't be afraid to say something, whether you're right or wrong. If you're wrong, that's great. But if you're right, you saved a life maybe. And I'll say one more thing about it. These people in Florida, these parents, you cannot imagine the grief and the hurt that they're feeling right now when they've lost a child. It's horrible. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up those points. I will say absolutely our resource officers engage our student bodies. That's one of the things that Wayne Pickett and Ron Story take into consideration when they're hiring resource officers. Gone are the days that if you can fog a mirror, you can get a job as being a Cobb County School District resource officer. We have very stringent requirements. Again, they're post-certified, so they have to re-qualify on their weapon. We have very specific training because, again, this is a school environment. There is no other environment that a police officer operates within like a school with hundreds and potentially thousands of students in one location under one roof. So we got to make sure that we've got them properly trained, and they are efficient at that training. I will tell you that the threats that we have responded to that have resulted in action, pretty much the majority of those have come from students that have said, hey, I saw this on Facebook, or hey, this Instagram post, was sent out, kind of thing. Parents being very vigilant in knowing what's on your students and your kids' Facebook and all the social media. Because, again, I think social media has brought about many more negatives than positives. Not saying there's not any positives, but you'd be hard-pressed to get past one hand on counting them. So, it's just one of those things where, we know the environment that we live in and we got to deal with it. It is what it is. So that being said, you have to engage students and parents in a different manner because, where in the past, in our day, the bragging would have been with your buddy that lives in the same neighborhood, and that's pretty much it. Now, you can post something and literally millions of people have seen it, commented on it, and you know, we know all how the commenters go. You know, you get behind a computer and you think anonymity, you know, makes you a big man. But, you know, that's unfortunately, that's the society we live in today. So we have to take all those things into consideration. But that being said, I would just say I believe that our community, especially our student community within the schools, understands that our resource officers are there for them. They interact with them, especially at the high school level. That's paramount to the successful operation of the resource officers in that high school.
And I will say this for the comfort of our school community is these resource officers are within minutes of any school in our district. So it's not like it's going to take 30 minutes for a resource officer to get to a situation. And of course, most situations are internal situations like a fight or, you know, something like that. But a resource officer, no matter where the school is located, there can be 1 or 2 or 3 resource officers there in minutes, not long term. It's minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Skimhorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our resource officers are on location, so it's going to take seconds for them to respond, and they're trained to respond, not to hunker down. So the other thing I'd like to stress, the locking capability. That's an evolutionary thing, too. Our administrative teams for the last 20 years has been constantly improving and upgrading on how to get locked down and how to get locked down quickly. And that's particularly important at our high schools because they are open campuses and they have multiple entry points. So I want to stress with your support and concurrence that at every one of our schools, whether it's elementary through high school, our administrative teams are very aware of trying to improve, trying to look for weaknesses. And they're not really trained. They're trained educators. They're not trained terrorist fighters, but they're doing a darn good job of doing it. And even in our older schools, they find ways to lock down push doors, you know, push open doors, and how to get things secured as quickly as possible. And we do, the general public doesn't know this. I'm sure they don't, and they shouldn't have to think of it. But daily with 114 schools, there's always an unidentified person on the campus or in the back of the campus. And generally it's just somebody walking through the campus or playing hooky from school or something like that. But they respond very quickly. So if I do say so, please add to or differ. We're not just sitting around in Cobb County and waiting for something to come to us. We're taking proactive action. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that again, Mr. Skimmerhorn, because you're right. And yeah, I can't say enough about our leadership. We have great leaders that are doing a tremendous job. The reason I brought attention to that and using Mr. Morgan's example of you know, every school is going to have areas identified that they need to improve on. That being said, though, you're exactly right. They're there as the educators to teach our students that show up. Public safety is there to make sure we're identifying, okay, where we need to work and that kind of thing. And you're right, they're not sitting around waiting for the grass to grow, so to speak. But and the reason I've kind of deliberately focused on that is because none of us like constructive criticism. As much as you can point to whatever, learn from your mistakes, blah, 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 blah. It's all that, you know, it's just hyperbole until it hits you, right? It's easier said than done. Constructive criticism is tough and it's uncomfortable. But until you're made aware of what needs to change, you may not know that needs to change. So, and that's for us all. You know, we're going to be doing this in every building. So there'll be times of discomfort for everyone. There'll be plenty of enough to share. But yeah, you're right. And I appreciate you bringing up that because, you know, it seems like that every time we turn around, more and more is being added to the plates of educators. And the principals are charged with making sure that their school's environment is the most appropriate place to teach, lead, and learn. And they've got a very difficult job. That goes without saying. And again, I can't say enough about our entire team in Cobb that just goes above and beyond each and every day. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Ms. Sayer?
Thanks, Mr. Ragsdale. I appreciate the emphasis that we are placing on safety. And you may have covered this, but what's the plan for spreading this throughout our schools? The new programs for safety.
So basically, well, the alert point system will be implemented district-wide. The schedule, I'm not going to say. We're starting at high school, and we'll be blowing through the entire district.
So when should it be completed?
Well, I'm not going to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So and
tomorrow.
I'm not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe by tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
As soon as possible,
Okay.
because again, we take very seriously, the benefit that this system brings for us and our staff and
So
students.
it's moving rapidly.
It is moving rapidly.
That's what I
yes.
wanted. Okay.
Yep.
And I know that the changing the locks is in Splost. Is this also in Splost? Yes. This is Splost funded? Okay. All right. Thank you.
It'll be both Splost 4 and 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ragsdale?
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to add that again. And so now I will ask Mr. Brad Johnson to come and bring our quarterly financial report.
Good afternoon, Board. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Board, Mr. Superintendent. I'm presenting to you today the quarterly financial report for the second quarter of fiscal year 2018. This report reflects financial data for the 6-month period ending December 31st, 2017. I will briefly cover some highlights from the first 4 sections of the report, which are finance, cash management, school food service, and capital projects. The remaining data at the end of the report is presented for informational purposes only and identifies payments and budget adjustments greater than $100,000. And as always, this report will be posted to our website to enable the public to review it. And in fact, I think we already have it posted. For today, I've placed the presentation at your desk, and you can follow along with this hard copy. You also have the complete first quarter financial report with a blue cover or black cover that you can refer to during the presentation. So in your handout, the first section of the report, tab Financial Report, this section contains a financial information for each of the district's individual funds, and as always, we focus on the general fund, the district's largest and primary fund. On your handout, please look at the pie chart on the financial report. You will notice that 50% of the fiscal year has elapsed, and we have collected 70% of total budget revenues, compared to 69% last year. So we're doing well and very comparable. A broad review of the general fund financial performance indicates that our revenue collections are similar to last year, but we continue to be tight, as always, as I've been telling you on the budget. A broad review of, and that's revenue. A review of the expenditures shows that we have spent 49.4% of the budget in the second quarter of this year compared to 50% last year. So we're a little bit behind last year, but we're still very tight. But from a percentage standpoint, our estimates are right on target, but with limited room for estimating error. As I previously stated, when the board approved the budget last year, our numbers are estimated in a tight range, and we must monitor budget versus actual for revenues and expenditures very carefully as we proceed through the remainder of this fiscal year. Remember, if we were off by just 1% of our estimates for both revenue and expenditures, that means that we could be off by as much as $18 million, and we do not want to be off the wrong way and have to contend with an over-budget scenario. So we're very careful with this. On the next slide, please. The next slide is a presentation as a summary of revenues and expenditures as of December 31st, 2017. The format of this report are that there are two sections down the left-hand side entitled Revenue and Expenditures. Across the top, there are multiple columns for original budget, revised budget, year-to-date actual, encumbrances, and several metrics on the right side for over or under budget and percent differences. In the first column, we begin showing the original budget is $1.023 billion in revenue and $1.026 billion in expenditure appropriations, resulting in a board-approved budgeted use of $3.2 million in fund balance. Next, please look at the first category titled Revenue. We begin with the original and revised budget of $1.023 billion. Actual revenue collected in the second quarter cumulatively was $717 million, which results in 70% collected halfway through the fiscal year. As many of you know, we collect most of our property tax revenue in the second quarter of the fiscal year, and as compared to the previous year, we were right on target. Next, please look at the second category entitled Expenditures. For expenditures, we begin with an original budget of $1.026 billion in the first column. In the second column, we show revisions to the expenditure budget, which include $5.9 million in encumbrances. And encumbrances are simply POs that have not been expensed yet. We have $4.2 million for a board-approved property purchase and a $5.6 million item in architecture expenditures. These changes revise the expenditure budget to $1.042 billion. Actual expenditures through the end of the second quarter are $508 million, with $4.5 million in encumbrances, resulting in the district of having spent 49.4% of the budget, one half of the way through the fiscal year. Next slide, please. This slide is regarding cash management. Cash management is the second section of a report. The first schedule in this section shows that we have earned $1,584,250.29 compared to last year, which was $645,000. So you can see that interest income is starting to rise, and that's a good thing. We've earned almost $1 million more in interest income than last year. Very good thing. You can see that at the bottom of the report, the weighted average rate of return is 1.08% compared to the average 3-month Treasury bill of 1.21%. And you probably might ask, well, why is that lower? Well, that's because in a rising interest rate environment, we're always a little bit behind, but we will catch up because as the interest rates rise, the next month we will get those interest increases. So we'll catch up with that. Our accounting department continues to be diligent to invest idle funds at the highest possible rates. Despite the low rates, we do regularly consult with our financial advisor, the PFM group, in order to maintain the best possible market rate of return, while at the same time ensuring that investments are safe. Next slide, please. This section of the report is for the school food service report. This report shows meal-related activity at each school for both the current month and fiscal year to date. For FY 2018 overall in the second quarter, elementary schools show a year-to-date loss of $721,000. Middle schools have a profit of $55,000. High schools have a profit of $164,000, and other section, which are USDA commodities and equipment purchases, have a profit of $76,000. So all these combined show a total program loss of $425,000, one half of the way through the fiscal year. As in previous presentations, it's not unusual for the food service programs to start off the year with a loss due to the fact that this program has to pay for July and August salaries before the new cafeteria sales begin coming in. Additionally, this program lost 2 days of revenue in this fiscal year as a result of the Irma hurricane event and multiple days for snow. We hope that this program will continue to operate at a break-even status, that compared with revenue and expenses as well as fund balance, even in the face of the Healthy Kids Act of 2010, which continues to severely curtail menu offerings for our students. Next slide, please. Next slide is a revenue chart reflecting Splost for revenues. This section of the big report includes Splost and capital projects. It reflects revenue and expenditures in the capital project funds. This includes Splost 3, Splost 4, and the countywide building fund. This schedule shows that collections for Splost 4 in calendar year 2017, while coming in below forecast projections, are ahead of last year's in comparison of dollars. So if you see this current year, in this calendar year, we're 9.1% below projections, but we are 4% above last year's actual at this same time. Inception to date, Splost 4 actual sales tax collections are $504 million compared to projections of $546 million, or 7.8% below projections. Some comments regarding these revenue collections. The district is continuing to monitor Splost revenues to identify trends in sales tax collections. The state of Georgia economy continues to improve, which might assist in closing this year's budget variance. Major projects, I think we might start seeing some incremental increases in sales tax that will help the Splost 4 program. And it also is anticipated that the district will collect dollars in state construction funding that could possibly assist in the district capital building programs. Mr. Chair, this concludes the presentation of the second quarterly financial report for this fiscal year. I will be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions? Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, I'd like some clarification on what some of these numbers are telling us. If you go down to the architect appointments for Splost 4 projects, or 5 projects rather, $5.6 million. And we don't show that encumbered, but that's an expenditure that's actually going to come out of the unassigned fund balance out of the balance sheet. Is that correct?
Right. For the architects, in order to accelerate these programs, the general fund will fund these, and it will come out of fund balance, but later reimbursed by Splost 5.
Okay. So that will actually not be coming out of our revenue eventually. Well, it never will be coming out of our revenue. It'll be an expenditure.
It'll be an expenditure currently whenever they are expended out, but then we will be eventually reimbursed. So eventually, it'll be a wash.
Right. But as far as revenue, it's not coming out of our current annual revenue.
No, sir. It would come out of fund balance.
Right. So the disparity there of $3 million is not a true disparity. Is that, you agree?
Well, the $3.2 million in fund balance use was a part of the original budget. The architect would be an additional $5 million, but that $5 million really is not a use in the long run. It will be a wash.
Right. So we'll pay it back to the balance sheet eventually.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Encumbrances, we have 5.9 at the end of the fiscal year, which is June the 30th. And this year, this 6 months, we've got 4.5 million. Are these just strictly invoices that we have received, or is it including state taxes and so forth?
So in government accounting, our staff will key in POs, and those POs will be encumbered. And what that does is it sets apart a little bit of the budget to pay for those so we don't overexpend what we have. So it is held until the expenditure is expensed, and then the encumbrance will go away when it's expended.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Kind of, but
it's reserving money in the budget temporarily so that we don't overspend and use more than we think we have moving forward.
But at say 30 days to 60 days, that 4.5 million will disappear, and there'll be another set of encumbrances.
And encumbrances are constantly changing.
Right.
Every month there's more POs keyed in, and then encumbrances are released and paid, and it's ever changing every month.
I want to go over to the Title I. Okay, on page 4 of 27,
Yes, sir.
do we get those federal dollars monthly, or how do we receive those dollars?
Okay, so Title I is a federal grant. It's reimbursable. We have to spend the money first, and then we're reimbursed. So that's another reason for us to have general fund balance, because we have to basically front the money, and then it's reimbursed. There's very detailed guidelines to use these funds. We have an array of Title I schools. The last count I had, we had 30 elementary, 11 middle school, and 3 high schools. And it's money given based on a economically disadvantaged population. And I think it's based on the free and reduced lunch rate. And our rate is somewhere in between 40 and 45% free and reduced lunch.
Okay, now, food services is not in these numbers, is that correct?
Food service is a completely self-supporting fund, completely separate from this.
So whatever we get from the federal government for Title I is used for instructional and whatever the categories are that's specified on page 4.
Yes, and in the financial statements, when we deal with federal funds, it's a little bit tricky to read because you all know that our fiscal year is July to June, but for the federal government, their fiscal year is October to September. So when you see these funds and they don't look like they're quite spent halfway through the year, that's because they're not halfway through their fiscal year because it's the federal fiscal year.
Which starts, what, October 1st?
October 1st.
Yeah. We have summer programs in some of our Title I schools. Is that funded through Title I money?
Don't know the answer to that. We do have a tuition school fund, and I'm not sure of all the programs right off the top of my head, but I think that's funded through another fund.
Okay.
For the tuition school fund.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the report.
Yes, sir.
And just, we've been through this sheet with regard to the projections before. And just for the public's benefit, can you describe how that car tag change has impacted this? Because it did have some significant ramifications relative to our projections versus actual.
Okay, so let me see if I can do this from memory. So,
and again, I know we've been done, but people looking at this for the first time may not have an understanding of why that projection versus the actual is, that delta is there.
okay, so people who lived in Cobb County a long time will remember the tag tax and remember the long lines, and you pay on your birthday, and that's how it used to be done. Now, I'm not quite sure, Mr. Sweeney, when it started, but it's been going several years. It's called TAVID. It's a title fee instead of the birthday tax. So when you buy a new car or you buy a new used car, whatever is new to you, you will pay a title fee on that car. And again, you won't pay birthday tax on that car. You'll just pay a one-time title fee. And a lot of times when they buy a new car, it'll be included in your loan, so you don't see it anymore. So you just pay the tag fee from there on out. So it's a one-time fee. And so what's happening now is the people that kept their old cars, that haven't bought new cars, they're still every month paying the birthday tax on the title of their car. But if you bought a new car or a used car since that started, you don't pay that birthday tax anymore. It's a one-time thing. So we have different streams of money going on at the same time. We initially had an influx of money with that, but as it's played out, it seems like it's coming back to where it was when we just had birthday tax as far as total funds received from both the birthday tax and the title fee. So we're in a good spot. But one thing is that the title fee is not property tax anymore. It's sales tax, basically, or a title fee that goes in. It's not sales tax. It goes into the general fund, and it used to go into Splost. Did I answer your question? It's a little bit tricky.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments, too, relative to this, because people will approach me in the community and say, why is it that the Cobb County Splost collection numbers are so different from yours? And the one thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration is that for the Cobb County portion, there are also several municipalities that they are splitting those funds with. I mean, for example, Powder Springs, Kennesaw, Ackworth, and so forth. And so you can't really do an apples-to-apples comparison on those projections. Is that an accurate statement?
That is true.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Thayer?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Your reports are always excellent and give us great detail. But as Mr. Sweeney just said, when we bring these things up, it shows things that our community will be asking us questions about. One that I can foresee is really probably more a Splost question than it is a financial. But help me understand on the Splost 3, if we collected $40,000 in interest on Splost money, which Splost 3 ended, let's see, that would have been 09 through 13. Why would we have money sitting there collecting interest when we should have already spent that to make the improvements?
We still have several projects that are ongoing, and one of the main ones there is the new financial system. And so we're still using that money that has not been spent out yet to work on the new financial system. We expect that to be completed actually within about 2 years. So as we still have that money, we're still earning interest on it.
That's there collecting that interest?
Yes.
Okay. So that takes up the whole amount?
Pretty much. That's the main program in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Ragsdale.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to ask Ms. Jennifer Lawson to come forward and bring a CTA update. This is going to be a multifaceted update. I ask you to hold your questions to the end. We got a couple of videos and some great information here that's also going to include some information about as I mentioned a couple of times, the Accelerated Career Academy, as well as just making sure that the community truly understands exactly what we are doing today. There was some, not a lot, but there was some misperceptions that without the Career Academy, somehow the students that are in CTAE were being left out. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to, number one, update the community and the board on everything that is currently going on, and then also give a glimpse into what kind of enhancements will be brought about by the Career Academy once that comes to fruition.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, I bring to you today an update on the status of our career, technical, and agricultural education program. February is National Career and Technical Education Month, so we want to take a moment to revisit the purpose and goals of our own CTAE program, as well as share with the board the findings of the district's CTAE audit conducted by the state in the fall. You may notice that the A is conspicuously missing in the national model. However, agriculture does play a significant role here in Georgia, so it does get top billing, hence we refer to ours as CTAE. I'd like to begin with a brief commercial that some of you may have seen.
Explore your future in the Cobb County School District's career and technical programs. Experience STEM careers in healthcare, computer science, construction, engineering, and many more. Extend your knowledge and skills as you move to college or a career. For more information on how you can prepare, visit our website at cobbctae.com.
If you have been to a movie recently, that commercial may look familiar to you. We have partnered with several movie theaters in Cobb County to have this video included in the promotions and commercials seen before the feature begins. This is just one example of our efforts to share the good work of our CTAE programs with our community, as well as encourage students, parents, and community businesses to tap into these incredible opportunities and resources. Our Career Technical and Agricultural Education, otherwise referred to as CTAE, is about preparing our students for their next step after high school, whether that is beginning a career, attending college in some form, beginning a registered apprenticeship, or joining the military. Whichever path they may choose, CTAE places an intentional focus on leveraging industry and post-secondary partners combined with K-12 education to ensure students have the necessary knowledge, skills, and experiences to thrive in the evolving workforce. The state of Georgia offers 130 pathways within 17 career clusters. The skills and experience provided in these pathways prepare students for a productive career and help meet our current and future workforce needs. 61% of students across the state are enrolled in CTAE programs, and the graduation rate for those students is 89%. How does Cobb County's CTAE program stack up? 49,556 students participated in CTAE classes in middle school and high school in 2017-18. We offered 50 pathways across 15 of the career clusters. We had 2,180 students who completed a pathway. The number of students who passed an end-of-pathway assessment increased by 13% last year alone. 94.8% of students who complete a CTAE pathway in the Cobb County School District graduate on time. Participation in CTAE programs has significantly contributed to an increase in STEM or STEAM certifications. We currently have 9 schools that have achieved Advanced Ed certification in STEM. 6 schools have achieved state STEM or STEAM certification, and 18 schools have met the requirement for the Cobb STEM certification. And finally, it is worth noting that our students earned a total of $449,662 last year through work-based learning opportunities that the CTAE programs afforded them before they even graduated from high school. I think we would all agree that these students, through both their work-related contributions and wages, have positively contributed to our county's economic development, and they haven't even graduated high school yet. Under the continued leadership and direction of the superintendent and our board, we have a long-standing tradition of excellence in our CTAE programs. However, we are constantly looking for ways to grow and enhance our practices and programs in an effort to best serve our students. Part of this ongoing improvement process includes participating in a career, technical, and agricultural education monitoring and risk assessment review conducted by the state. Though we as a district are continually monitoring our CTAE program, this audit is conducted every 5 years and focuses on the financial and curricular integrity of our programs. State team generally includes about 20 members, comprised of Georgia Department of Education program managers as well as other district CTAE directors and supervisors. In October, the district participated in our 5-year review. The state team reviewed the procedures and practices of our CTAE department and identified a representative sample of schools they visited to review school-based procedures, practices, and programs. This year, the schools included in this review were Allatoona, Harrison, Lassiter, and Sprayberry. At the conclusion of the district and school visits, their initial findings were presented to the superintendent, district leaders, and the participating high school principals. We've recently received the final audit report from the Department of Education and would like to briefly share some of the commendations noted and recommendations made moving forward. The team commended Cobb for having a supportive superintendent who understands and values CTAE and what CTAE affords our students. They appreciated that 100% of our federal Perkins funds were spent on advancing CTAE goals and initiatives in our schools. They commended our plans for our Career Academy. They noted that we have 10 industry-certified programs with plans for 20 more by 2019. As was referenced earlier, 49,556 students attending CTAE classes in high school and middle school was also noteworthy of their recognition. They recognize the significance of having 56 students enrolled in youth apprenticeship programs and that all of our high schools have active career tech student organizations. And again, they were impressed that 397 students enrolled in work-based learning earned a total of $449,662 in the 16-17 school year. Finally, they commended increasing the end-of-pathway assessment rate by 13% in just one school year, and that we have been working to integrate academic content learning in many of our CTAE programs. Regarding recommendations, I want to pause for just a moment and clarify that these are not findings or issues that need correction, as you may sometimes see in audits, but rather suggestions from the outside audit team regarding ways we might continue to grow and enhance our CTAE programs. Fortunately, most of these were already goals identified through our own internal and ongoing evaluation and improvement process, so we will continue to devote our resources to these areas moving forward. For the district, they recommended we consider identifying additional funds that could be designated for CTAE programming. They provided some suggestions in places where we might fine-tune our inventory process, and they would like to see us refine our percentage of workday designations in the CPI report. Local school recommendations from the schools that they visited included reviewing scheduling practices, looking for opportunities to integrate more career-related activities, encouraging pathway completion, increase the number of industry-certified programs, increase the use of the Industry Advisory Board, and look for opportunities to increase recruitment of non-traditional students in CTAE courses. And finally, they recommended that we continue to look for ways to grow the number of students who participate in our career and technical student organizations. What does the future for CTAE in the Cobb County School District look like? It's been a focus of ours, and we will continue to focus on the increasing the number of industry-certified programs. Secondly, we'll continue with the development and implementation of academic design of the Career Academy and its associated pathways. As a point of interest, we have been working closely with our post-secondary partners at Chattahoochee Technical College, as well as industry partners, on building the contextual learning experience portion of the academic design. We have focused on construction and automotive pathways, since those are two that are slated to be at the Career Academy and are currently available at Osborne High School to students. Once these two are complete and we apply the lessons learned from this process, we'll focus on replicating the same process and producing the same product for the remaining pathways, so that when construction is complete, we are ready to begin providing students access to a world-class facility with an intentional focus on contextual learning supported through essential industry and post-secondary partnerships and experiences. Finally, we plan to continue to expand our marketing strategy so our students, families, and community are aware of and can take advantage of the remarkable resources and opportunities available to them through the district's CTAE programs. Similar to the movie theater commercial you viewed earlier, as part of these continued efforts, I'd like to take just a moment to share with you one video within a series we are developing that perhaps tells the story of what CTAE in Cobb affords our students better than I can.
Welcome to the first video in a series highlighting our fantastic CTAE programs. We'll focus on construction in this video. We have excellent construction programs at Allatoona, Kennesaw Mountain, North Cobb, and Osborne High Schools. Let's take a deeper dive into the Kennesaw Mountain program, which is a good model replicated in our other high schools.
Before I had taken this CTAE class, I was not really sure what I wanted to do. It opened my eyes to a new opportunity, and it's eventually what I'm going to lean towards in my career.
Finding young talent to come into the construction industry is very difficult, and the existence of the construction programs in the schools gives us an avenue to cultivate new talent to come into our industry.
The importance of our partnership with industry is enormous. It not only brings validity to the instruction that they're receiving, but it's bringing rewarding, high-paying careers.
If they're already in a construction program, their ability to come onto a job site and go to work for a contractor is greatly enhanced.
We're constantly communicating with industry to find out what they are wanting in their future workforce.
We really want to be that bridge, that connection. We know that our programs need industry support, they need industry partnerships, and they also need to have industry-relevant training for the benefit of the students in the CTAE programs.
Cobb CTAE programs enjoy partnerships with many companies, including C.W. Matthews and the Holder Construction Company, who employ student interns from the 4 construction programs. Work-based learning is a critical component that we use to prepare our students to be successful in the workplace at an early age.
The internships for these students actually gives them tangible work skills. It's a test drive. They get the opportunity to figure out whether it is really what they want to do.
I didn't know if it was really for me, but all 3 construction pathways done, and he offered me an internship with C.W. Matthews.
Over this past summer, I worked with Holder Construction. They're a general contracting company. At Holder, they allowed me to take on small responsibilities to get me into the swing of things.
In class, you really learn to work in a business environment and with your team. Without that, I'd be lost at even a job like this. And because of his construction program, I started looking into construction programs and did a summer course at Texas A&M in the Construction Science Division and got a scholarship to Texas A&M.
They gave me an opportunity to be in the field. I wore this jacket because I'm proud that I was able to take on this internship with Holder. It means a lot to me.
Construction uses a lot of the things that I like to do. I want to have the opportunity to experience everything, and then after I can choose which one for sure I want to go into.
We have a need in electricians, plumbers, drywallers, cement finishers, truck drivers, even into the future of estimators, project managers, superintendents. This industry is growing. Our state is growing.
We have plenty of folks that work for us for years and they say, hey, I want to pursue an engineering degree, a construction management degree. And we wholeheartedly support that. And we actually, in a lot of cases, will pay for it. We have to get in front of these kids early and help them understand what a career path is and what they may want to do with their lives outside of high school.
The opportunity that exists in the Cobb County construction programs is unprecedented for students, and rolling into workforce development and economic development and career opportunities for students, that's all coming together.
I've learned that this is an opportunity that I would like to pursue. It's something I'm passionate about, something that it provides a career opportunity for me, whereas if I just went into college blindly, not knowing what I wanted to do, I might not be in the same position I am today.
We're currently partnering with our schools and industry partners to develop similar videos for each of our pathways to highlight and inform our students, parents, and community of what they have access to. I want to thank David Birch, our digital production coordinator, for his assistance in the development of this video. Before concluding, I do want to take a moment to also recognize the remarkable leadership behind the work presented here. I've had the privilege of sharing this work with you today, but it's the team behind the work that makes it all come to fruition. This work is led by the Instruction and Innovative Practice Office, the director, Melissa Morris, Jackie Brown, our CTAE supervisor, Angela Cavacci Sparks, our CTAE coordinator, and Dr. Beverly Holyfield, CTAE coordinator. I would also like to recognize the leadership of our local CTAE teachers and leaders at local schools who work tirelessly day in and day out to support these programs and the students who are in them. Finally, we want to thank the Communications Office under the leadership of Mr. John Stafford for their assistance in the development of the CTAE commercial. At this time, this concludes my presentation, Mr. Superintendent, and I turn it back to you for discussion.
So the one thing that I will say, the video, that just was highlighting the construction program at Kennesaw Mountain. Obviously, just in construction, there are 3 other schools that have construction programs. And so to have upper executives, vice presidents, as you saw in the video, say that the opportunities afforded through our programs in Cobb County School District are unprecedented, I think that's a pretty good testimony to what we are doing as far as servicing those needs of all of our students. Again, you saw from the video that this particular path, construction, students have the opportunity to either look at, as you heard the construction executive mention, somebody coming out of this program from Kennesaw Mountain can go onto a job site and immediately go to work. So that when we look at down the road, you also heard one of the students that was an intern actually took an online class at Texas A&M and got a scholarship. So it's not just kids that are going one path or the other. This is for kids that are interested in construction, regardless of which way they want to go. If they want to go straight to work or go through a certification program or go on and get a degree before they go into that field, our high schools are providing those opportunities for every single student. So we expect that when the Career Academy is designed and opens, that will just be a further enhancement of what we already have in our district. You saw that Osborne was another school that has the construction pathway, so certainly that will be a significant part of the Career Academy that's going to be on Osborne's campus. So we're very excited, but again, I wanted to take this opportunity for Jennifer to be able to bring an update of CTAE, and Jackie does just an awesome job of directing our CTAE programs and kind of give a glimpse into exactly what's going on, because one of the things, quite honestly, that we don't do that we have not done a tremendous job of in the past is telling our own story. And in today's world, you've already heard my rant about social media. Just because you read it on the internet doesn't make it true. I know that's surprising for a lot of people, but what we need to do is get our story out there, such that fake news or misinformation doesn't become repeated, and therefore people think the more they hear it, the more it becomes true. It's still inaccurate information. So we wanted to take this opportunity to kind of showcase exactly what's going on in CTAE, the links that we're going to get that word out. As you mentioned, the commercial in the movie theaters, we're looking to expand that so that the kids that are going to the movies, they can kind of get inundated to that, or just get a taste of it and maybe pique their interest. So be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Mr. Scammerhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a few, they somewhat unrelated, but first of all, thank you, Ms. Lawson, for your presentation. And I will say publicly that she's new at this, so we'll be kind. She's not.
Baptize her. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, well,
Mr. Morgan.
Okay. Here we go. No. One curiosity is in your report you included STEM and STEAM. And even though those have career-based kind of curriculums, I think more people think of them as academically going to college and academic courses. How integrated are true CTAE students into STEAM or STEM?
That's a great question, Mr. Scammerhorn. When you look at what some of those CTAE pathways are, they're grounded in STEM type of activities, the critical thinking, the math, and the science. When you look at architectural design and drawing, when you look at automotive, business and computer science, broadcast, construction, culinary arts, the skills that are foundational to a STEM experience, in CTAE, it's about problem-based learning and hands-on, and so many of those things occur in both of those environments, which is why our CTAE program supports our STEM initiative as well.
Many of our career tech students are very intelligent, but they don't relate to the upper level maths, like, okay, advanced STEM you had on here. So is within STEM, can I get a business math?
absolutely you can do a business math without having to be STEM necessarily. A lot of what you hear us talking about contextual learning is providing students that real-world application. Those same students that you speak of who may not enjoy math for the sake of math will understand the concept and master the content by giving them a real-world example and a problem that they're striving to solve based on the application of those very math concepts. And so that's what our CTAE program strives to provide, as well as our STEM, is really the context and the relevancy of the learning to apply the knowledge and skills that we're providing them.
We try to understand to integrate our courses, like if a science course, with a math and so on and so forth, and depending on the school, what do you think the percentage of integration, course integration is with our true CTAE students? Do you think a lot of our CTA students are really in high technology, engineering, math, upper mathematics, all that?
I do think there's a cross-section that over time, because of what our economy is requiring, what our workforce is going to need to be doing, it's no longer an either-or. We have lots of students who can take the very courses that you're referencing, but that CTAE pathway provides a relevancy. It taps into their passion, something they enjoy, but they also don't have to be in those courses in order to be in some of our CTAE pathways. So as you heard on the video with the student who found his passion in construction, and just through his internship and his CTAE pathway completion, he was able to find that he really is enjoying this, and he was able to tap into a course at Texas A&M and has found a reason perhaps for post-secondary education based on what his passion is. So what we're striving to do is provide students an opportunity regardless of where their life leads them. Some students will know at 18 that they want to go get a career, or they want to go to college. Some students will figure that out 25, 30 when life, meets them later on, and they know they need to get an education to better provide for themselves or their families. And these experiences in CTAE really open the doors to whatever path they may choose. They are intentionally not limiting students by being in those courses.
Well, I don't want to belabor it too much more, but you keep coming back to CTAE, and I'm stressing, or we're integrating STEM with our CTAE, which is fine. There we have many students that start out CTA and move into STEM. I just don't see our parents and the general public collating STEM and CTAEs together.
It might help if I clarify that you're not necessarily you're not looking for a STEM CTAE. What was noted in some of our commendations, you noted that the state recognized the integration of the academic with CTAE. That's the relevancy. The point in the presentation was to show that for our schools in our district who really are focused on those STEM-type learning activities, the CTAE courses support that initiative. It's not one or the other, and it's not necessarily making STEM and CTAE living together. It's just really one is supporting the other, and we can have students who go through CTAE with really no intention for STEM per se, and you have students that are in STEM that may never take a CTAE, but there is a way for those two to support each other based on a student's interest.
Okay. And then on your last, let's see, here we go. On the summary of audit recommendations, devote additional funds for CTA programming. Who did the audit, and where do they suggest we get these extra funds?
Well, that's the nice part about an audit. When outsiders come in, they provide you the recommendations, but perhaps not the solution of where that would come from. So obviously they want us to grow the CTA program like we do, but no, there was no recommendation as to the location of those. They just would like to see us perhaps, if the opportunity presents itself. So
they didn't suggest that we curtail our advanced math courses and move that money into CTA, did they?
No, sir.
They didn't say to go to the superintendents and get more money from, okay.
No,
I'm
sir.
Making light of it, so as you know. And then one last thing, so I don't totally monopolize the whole thing. I recently, just a week or so ago, received a email and about Skills USA State Leadership and Skills Conference experience to be so valuable, and that we're going, and I'll try to paraphrase so I don't insult or bore anybody as far as this lengthy email. And it says Cobb is the second largest school system in the state, but our county participation in this huge event, which qualifies students to move on to the nationals, is small in comparison to other metro Atlanta school systems and even some of the rural schools in the state. And his hope that he's sending the email, which was very, wasn't being critical of us or anything, is being very positive, trying to stir some interest. My hope is to promote the opportunities that the other schools are missing out because they may not fully understand Skills USA. In 2021, the national conference moves to Atlanta, and it would be great to have a strong Cobb County presence. Are you aware of this?
I am. That's part of one of the recommendations that came from the audit, which is to continue to grow the number of students who participate in our career and technical student organizations. It's through there that they oftentimes will choose also to participate in those competitions. So that does go along with some goals we have had, as well as what the audit team recommended, is that we continue to grow those organizations. We will continue to have students who choose to participate, and we will continue to encourage that.
And I'm going to wake up our communications department here. Hello, Mr. Stafford. Sir, and this, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but were you aware of this? And may I make a request that y'all talk and let's get the word out? You know, we have a year and a half, a couple years at the most, and also trying to get other schools involved in Skills USA. And the last question, I promise. How many total employees, part-time, full-time and part-time, do we have in our instructional CTAE? Is that the entire staff you just introduced us?
That is pretty much the team. We have a few more hands that assist us on the clerical side, but yes,
Okay.
these individuals do an awful lot of work.
Am I correct in that 64% or thereabouts does not go to college? 64% of all students, high school students. Is that true? Can anybody help?
You know, I can't tell you, Mr. Scamhorn, off the top of my head what that number is, so I would hate to.
At least, and certainly the number that start college, very few graduate as far as the proportion. It's my, in the past, it said that all freshman classes are cut in half by the time they go to sophomore in college. That class is cut in half by the time they become juniors in college, and so on and so forth. So there's quite a bit. And I was just wondering if we're not disproportionately lean on our career and tech staff compared to our other areas. I'll leave that as an open question. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, and thank you.
Is there a charge for the Skills USA endeavor?
I do believe there is. It is organized through the Career Technical Student Organization, so I do believe there is an associated registration cost to participate.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Mr. Banks, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say that Cobb County is like a field of diamonds. If you ever read that story, it's very positive. The CTAE is just one of those diamonds, and it appears that there's a lot of facets that are being polished in that diamond. So I look forward to more information, because this is like a hidden secret that the public probably, I would say probably 90% of the public doesn't even know we have a CTAE program. I have some questions, though. You've got almost 50,000 students that are participating in CTAE. That's almost 45% of our student population, which is 112,000. And if you take out the elementary students, it appears that we may have close to 80 or 90% participation of all of our students in CTAE. Is that reasonable?
Yes, sir. When we looked at the average between, I believe it was 2014 and 2017, the number came closer between our middle school and high school of 88%, taking advantage of some type. That doesn't necessarily mean they were a pathway completer, but they had access to some CTAE course or courses.
And do we have any statistics that show the CTAE students, how many actually go into the workforce versus going to college? Do we have any kind of breakdown or comparisons?
We get some very raw data that really isn't very trustworthy because, of course, we can pull it, but it's really self-reported. And so we try to gather, but it's what students, before they leave, tell us they intend to do, as opposed to what things transpire. So we do not have a hard number on that, but I know that is something that the state even continues to look at, having that information more valid and easily available for us to put our fingers on.
And one final question or comment. 94.8% of the CTAE students graduate. How does that compare to the overall graduation for the county?
Those refer, that 94.8% refer to students who complete a pathway. And of course, being a completer means you've completed a series of 3 courses that begin from introduction and move to more complex and application of skills. And so obviously our graduation rate is not 94.8%. So we would like to encourage more students to take part because the analysis and correlation seems to suggest that it helps students to have those experiences and stay on track for graduation.
So, but our overall county graduation rate is what percent? Is it 70%, 80%? Does anybody?
It's in the 80s, but I hate to quote 80.
Okay.
84 was the last calculation.
So the CTAE student has a much greater chance of actually graduating on time than a non-CTAE student. Is that a valid statement?
I think we want to clarify that if you complete a pathway, the percent of those students, yes, but obviously we have a high number of students that would not necessarily complete a pathway that also graduate. But if you're comparing those two, then it does seem to suggest that students having exposure to those kind of courses would keep them on track towards on-time graduation.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed the presentation. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and this is good information for the community to know that we have these capabilities in our school. I assume in every school.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fantastic presentation. Thanks for the update, Ms. Lawson. Mr. Scamahorn hit on one of my questions, and I love that line, devote additional funds for CTAE programming, and it's a question of where those funds might come from. The question I have is relative to allotments, and it has to do, like, for example, when we deal with gifted allotments, we know that there's additional funds that follow those. Does the state treat I will call the technical programs for CTAE any differently? Is there additional funds that come through the allotment process because of that?
We actually, CTAE gets slightly higher. Certain things within education merit certain dollars, and CTAE does earn additional funds and at a slightly higher rate. And those do come from the state to the district, and then our office then works with Ms. Stouter's office on the allotment process and how to fund those programs, or which ones are not in place but the school is planning to implement. So, right. Yes, sir.
So you may not know the answer to this question, and I don't suspect that you will, but since the state is now putting greater emphasis on CTAE, seems to be the kind of the forefront of certain individuals' campaigns, for example, are they making adjustments and contributing additional funds for CTAE programming? Because this review, and I'm sure the Georgia Department of Education is aware of this, but do we know of any additional funds that will be going into these programs?
Based on everything that I have seen drop currently, I have not seen any notation of an increase in funds for such.
Yeah, so, I mean, it becomes, and so, again, and what we're finding, and the reason I'm bringing this up is more and more of the burden for education is falling to local education authorities. And given the budget challenges that we have, this will continue to be a struggle. And if the state is intent on pushing this, the state needs to get behind this and begin pushing this and contributing more funds to, I think, what everybody believes is vital components of the education of our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Lawson. Couple of questions that I have. First question I have is, can you explain to me what the inventory process looks like?
We have anything that's federal grants, like the Perkins grant, how we allocate those funds, and then once they become purchased with those dollars, they belong to the district. So let's say we assign a certain school A has a program, and for some reason that program changes. It's imperative that we have an inventory process that we know where those resources are, because it wouldn't be uncommon as we maximize, to Mr. Sweeney's point, every dollar we have, to reallocate that inventory and that equipment, which can be extremely expensive, to another program should one program decide not to continue at a high school. So we do a really good job of knowing where that is, but of course as an audit team comes together, they've had some fine-tuning, some suggestions of ways that we may stream that a little easier and better have our thumb on it in a more timely fashion.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, because my assumption was that inventory was talking about how you bring the children in, but we're talking more resources, operational type things. Okay. Other question I have is, says student pass rate on end of pathway assessment increased by 13% in 1 year. First question is, are we speaking the most recent year?
The conclusion of last year,
Conclusion
yes, sir.
of last year, okay. And 13%, so what was the baseline? What, we went from 40 to 53, 53 to 66, 66, 79, or what did we, 76, what do we?
That's a great question. I don't have that number in front of me, but let me get it for you and I will follow up with you.
Okay.
What is of interest in that is that end of pathway assessments are actually created by the industry. And so they are certifying mastery at a level that they believe recognizes that they're ready for work and employment. So not all of our pathways have a pathway assessment. For example, only 12 of them do that. So it's not 100%. And so the number won't necessarily, what I would like to pull for you potentially is the number of students that are completing a pathway that have an end of pathway assessment. But again, there are 130 pathways. We have 12 that actually have an industry certified pathway assessment that they have created.
Okay, and the industry they create the assessment, and of the 130, 12 of the pathways have the assessment. Do you know what 12 those are?
The 12, as a matter of fact, I think I have left that list off as well, but let me get those for you. I can tell you the ones that have an industry certification standard so that when you walk out, you're ready to be hired, and those are agricultural education, architectural drawing and design, automotive service, business and computer science, broadcast video production, construction, culinary arts, early childhood, engineering and technology, graphic communication, healthcare science, marketing, sales, and services.
Final question, Mr. Chair, thank you, is the young people that I see at graduation, handling the cameras and running all that CTA, is that CTA? It's not.
STEM.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Scammahorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question. Let me preface this. It's that one official but social event where I met a framing contractor who, what they do is they put up framing for commercial and residential housing in subdivisions. And we were talking about his business, and he's been in business 15 years. And I asked him about his employees, and he said, I can't get enough employees, framing contractors. Now, that's the guys with putting up the 2x4 studs and the sheet plywood and whatever, not the finishing carpenters. Then I was at another event at Allatoona High School, met an electrical contractor, and he can't get enough apprentices or people to even pull wire. That's pulling wire through the studs and the flooring and all that. Here's my question. We have 4 construction programs going on. If I'm a student at, I can't remember all 4. I know North Cobb and Kennesaw Mountain's 2 of them. I think Allatoona's one. Okay, but if I'm at Sprayberry and I'm a 10th grader and I want a construction class, can I get it?
You're going to enroll in the Career Academy, Mr. Scamahorn.
We don't have a career academy yet.
But we are going to have one soon.
I know, but I'm a 10th grader now. Can I get a construction class if I'm at Sprayberry and I go to my counselor and I want to go to Kennesaw Mountain or North Cobb? Do they have a spot for me? And can I get over there? Is it offered?
You could apply through Choice that opens each year to have access to one of those. If you're asking regarding a magnet per se, it doesn't work quite like that, but there would be an opportunity to take advantage of that if Kennesaw Mountain had it.
Let me answer the question. So here's where I think you're headed. If you're a sophomore at Allatoona High School and that pathway is offered at Allatoona High School, you can absolutely sign up to take the class. Can somebody from Osborne High School go to Allatoona and take the same class? No. Unless they go through HB 251 school choice transfer and transfer to Allatoona. Now, that's what the Career Academy will in fact bring is, and again, this is preliminary because we've not nailed down the actual design yet, but potentially one of 3 access pathways. Pathway is not the right term. One of 3 access methodologies. A student can go full-time to the Career Academy, and any kind of core work, English, language arts, those kind of things would be taken at Osborne. Number 2, a student can go part-time to Career Academy and remain at their home school for any extracurriculars and those kind of things in those core subjects. Or 3, the student can go just over the summer to the Career Academy and take the pathways that they're interested in. So in that regard, that's one thing that will be brought to the district that doesn't currently exist is that access methodology of students being able to go to a particular place to take a particular course, array of courses to end in a potential certification or potential years of college credit. So that's one thing that will be different. But to get at your question, if a student is at Allatoona, they can absolutely sign up to take any course they want to at Allatoona. But another high school student cannot come to Allatoona to take that course.
Thank you. Here's where I'm to some degree, and maybe I miss it here, but I think we're talking apples and oranges. Back to my thing. Like when I was at Sprayberry as the Career and Tech Department Chair, I also had to coordinate with 4 other schools, Walton, Lassiter, Pope, and Wheeler. They fed students to Sprayberry because we had we had 13 programs, and they provided bus transportation, and we had a substantial number of those students coming to us at Sprayberry on a programmed curriculum where they could get through career tech. Okay, so we've lost that. We have no schools that are feeding from other schools to help those students.
An example where we do would be JROTC. We do have some schools
Pardon? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
For ROTC, So we do have some students who have access to an ROTC program, and we'll transfer in. But for the most part, as Mr. Ragsdale stated, those programs, unless you access it through school choice, you wouldn't necessarily be moving from Sprayberry to Allatoona just for the CTAE program.
And remember that the time that you're talking about was pre pathways. So everything, I know what you're talking about, because way back in the day,
Wait a minute, I'm not that old.
We did the same thing in Paulton, to where, we only had 3 or 4 high schools, but then students would travel from one high school to the other to take the CTAE courses. That does not, to answer your question, that does not exist now in Cobb.
And again, I'm going to not belabor it. I didn't mean to start, but I'll say that that was a opportunity that our previous students, and I'm not indicting anyone here, because we went through a severe recession. We had to go through a lot of furloughs, and we've lost programs. But I would submit to you that the academy is not the be-all, the end-all, wherever we have 112, 114,000 students, and we're not going to be able to put them all through there. And I would suggest that we look at expanding our programs where at least our juniors and seniors can have career and tech choices like they used to have back in the day. Thank you. I appreciate. I know you weren't anticipating my questions, and you did very well. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, I do want to circle back around as I've looked back at my notes. Our end of pathway assessments are in all courses. It's those 12 industry certification. Although the end of pathway assessments are industry derived, but they're 2 separate things. There's industry certification, and there are 12 courses which I listed for you. All of our pathways, all 50, have an end of pathway assessment, which also is derived from industry input.
And it's my assumption, Mr. Chair, if I might, that you do that the same way if you take your math. End of the semester, I take it.
Yes, sir. It's like an end of grade or an end of course assessment.
Gotcha.
And I'm going to work on the percentage of increase in 13% in 1 year, finding out the previous year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Ragsdale, I'd like to make a point here and recognize Ms. Brown and her group there. Mr. Scamahorn, Mr. Chastain. I don't know if anybody else had the opportunity to go to this Future Fest that they had at the Civic Center. That's a pretty awesome thing for the kids to see and have the opportunity to be involved. You never know. I mean, they had drones, caterpillars, and robots, and they brought them in from all over the county, and it was something to see. Mr. Scamhorn.
Just real quick, those are the kind of things we need, and that needs to be expanded. I understand that's only the second year. Is that true? Yeah. Fantastic. We need a lot more of that kind of stuff. And throw me in if I can help in any way. Thank you.
Mr. Ragsdale.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to do a flip-flop here, if okay. I want to go ahead and pull up agenda item number 4, because I believe we have additional people here. Brad does. So if we can go ahead, Brad, if you will, go ahead and come up and let's take agenda item number 4.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Superintendent. Board agenda item number 4 is a recommendation for approval of a resolution ratifying and confirming the acceptance of the best bid for the purchase of $40 million in short-term construction notes and documents associated with those notes. So let me talk a little bit about short-term construction notes and the various details that the board needs to be aware of. Number 1, what is a short-term construction note? Similar to a TAN, or a tax anticipation note used for general fund purposes usually, a short-term construction note is a short-term debt for a calendar year that must be paid back in the calendar year in which it was borrowed. These short-term notes would be repaid by the end of the calendar year using Splost revenue proceeds that will be collected each month during the calendar year. Short-term notes are not considered long-term debt. Short-term debt is debt less than a year, while long-term debt is debt greater than a year. Number two, how are district construction costs currently paid? Construction and other Splost projects are currently paid using Splost funds that are collected on a monthly basis. It is a pay-as-you-go procedure. Number three, why is the district considering a short-term construction note? Well, construction costs in Cobb County are estimated to increase. We try to roughly say 3, 4, 5% each year. By borrowing funds and starting projects at the beginning of a calendar year, it is estimated that construction projects could be less expensive, resulting in substantial savings for the school district. Number four, what is the borrowing timeline? Well, first of all, at the January 25th board meeting, we presented the short-term construction notes proposal and resolution to the board for approval. This approval provided administration the authorization to proceed with the bids to the U.S. financial market. Step two, our financial advisor, Public Financial Management, assisted CSD to market notes and accept bids in order to get the best bid. These bids were accepted and compiled this morning. Step three represents today's February 15th board work session, where we have our financial advisor team from Public Financial Management here to present the bidding process and the lowest bid representing the lowest net interest cost to the school district. I would note that because of the district's high credit ratings, which is both AAA and MIG-1, and because the school district has no long-term debt, we feel like we've got some pretty good results to show you today. So with that topic, Mr. Chair, Mr. Superintendent, I would like permission to invite Mr. Courtney Knight, who is the Managing Director for Public Financial Management, to the podium to present the bidding process and the lowest bid for your consideration and approval. Now, as he comes to the podium, I need to pass out a handout to the board regarding the bid results as well as the resolution.
Thank you, Brad. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Ragsdale, I'm Courtney Knight. I'm a director in Public Financial Management's Atlanta office. Brad, thanks for the vote of confidence, but I'd be looking to be named managing director in the next couple of years, hopefully. This morning, I'd like to congratulate you on your receipt of 5 bids from some outstanding financial institutions, global financial institutions. I'd also like to congratulate your staff on a well-orchestrated process to get this financing to this stage and be prepared for closing on March 1. The 5 bids you received were from Bank of America Merrill Lynch at 1.38%, TD Securities at 1.35%, JP Morgan at 1.35%, Citigroup at 1.30%, and the winning bid from Morgan Stanley at 1.25%. I'd like to point out that what we do is we compare these bids to an index, which is called MIG-1. MIG-1 measures the rate on short-term, basically one-year paper across the marketplace. MIG-1 this morning was at 1.35%. So your winning bid at 1.25 is actually 10 basis points, 0.1% through or better what the national index is. And that compares extremely favorably to the other 16 short-term financings that we tracked in the marketplace. The next best bid in the market was 4 basis points through MIG-1, so you did indeed set the market this morning for your note sale. and I'd be pretty pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So between now and the actual closing date, is this subject to volatility?
No, not at all. The bids were firm this morning, and that's the rate that you will receive upon closing.
So there's a lock on this?
There is, yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Scamahorn?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding, and I don't know, Mr. Johnson, you may have to answer this. This is a yearly note, right? And we have to have it paid back by December 31st, or is it 1 year from the time we sign the paperwork?
This is a calendar year financial model, so we will borrow in a calendar year and pay it back by the end of that calendar year.
So we really don't, do we see a impediment here because we're already in mid-February? So it's really a 10-month note, not a
Well, that's
yearly.
true. We're just borrowing for a shorter period of time, but
we can spend it quicker?
But we can spend it and finish it by December 31st.
I think the point to be made is that this is, and we speak like this like it's just a penny, but it's only $40 million. The tax anticipation against it is $150 million, which is the Splost revenue for the year. Now, as we move forward into Splost 5, that $40 million will probably increase substantially. So then it will be more imperative, and you will see that as we bring future short-term notes to the board. We're constructing that process now such that we can get the money approved or get the money earlier, so that we can get it in January, February. So we're backing this up with it being, again, only $40 million this time. We didn't see the need to try to jump through a lot of hoops as far as getting specially called board meetings, because we had to kind of wait to see, okay, are we going to change the board calendar where we only have one meeting a month? So now that being said, so looking at the target of next January, February, to get the money, we're going to back that process up into this current calendar year such that we'll do the bids, get everything approved such that this step will be taken in December such that we can then get the money in January. So that's a good point.
Yeah, thank you. I guess that answers my question, so that we can have more flexibility with the money when we get it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your Morgan Stanley page, where you have the breakdown of the bid, in your box, you have a dollar price of 100.596, but in your bid, you have a 100.58. Why is there a difference?
Mr. Banks, could you please repeat your question?
Okay, in your box, where you have your maturity date, amount, dollars, coupon percent, yield percent, and the dollar price, you have a number of 100.596. Now, under that, you have a bid line that has 100.58. Why is there a difference?
That's just rounding. This page was actually produced by a company known as iPrio. They receive the bids electronically, and they're transmitted to us over the internet, and I assume that's just rounding.
Okay. Do I understand from what you're showing here that we're actually going to, this $40 million is going to cost us 6.3 or 6.42 thousand? Is that correct?
Yes, in a manner. The winning bid was at a premium, so they're actually going to pay you somewhat more than $40 million, and you can subtract that premium from the interest that you're going to pay, something we discussed this morning.
explain what you just said.
So the bidders bid a 2% coupon.
Okay.
They want to pay the investors 2% because investors have a psychology that says, you know, I don't want to receive a coupon of 1.25. Pay me a coupon of 2%. Well, in order to get the yield of that 2% coupon down to 125, the bidder pays you more than the dollar price. They pay you more than 100 cents on the dollar. So that premium above 100 cents on the dollar comes right to the district at closing. Now,
we pay that.
You will receive that.
Okay.
The district will receive that, more than $40 million. And the amount higher than $40 million is what we call a premium.
Okay.
Now, you'll pay back interest at the end of the year of that $600,000 mark, but you can count against that $600,000 the premium that you're going to receive at closing.
Okay. Now, we're saving 4%, 4.3% estimated construction costs on this $40 million. That's $160,000. No,
It's way more than the cost of getting the loan. The savings in construction costs will be far and above the cost of the loan. That's kind of the first check box of doing a short-term note. If the savings in construction do not greatly outweigh the cost of getting the loan, then it's not a good business decision to get the loan.
So our construction cost should save us about 1.6 million. That pretty close, you know, rough numbers. Okay. All right. So it does make sense economically to do this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You're welcome. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this is directed towards council. If you take a look at the Exhibit A, it says Exhibit A attached, but then the winning bid is not marked as Exhibit A. I don't know if it needs to be marked as Exhibit A, or if it's just enough that it follows the page.
I presume that'll be filled in for closing.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that?
Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, I make a recommendation, if there's no further questions, that we include this as a consent item.
Second. All in favor? Without objection? Good to me.
All right, I appreciate letting us go out of order a little bit. Now, going back to the last item on the superintendent's report, Edna's Law, as you will remember or be reminded of, Representative Erica Thomas has dropped this legislation, and greatly appreciate her doing this. This is what will allow our resource officers to run radar and laser within school zones. So what you have in your notebook is a resolution that I would like, and that's why it's listed for potential action. I would like the board to entertain, if you will, to sign that resolution in support of this legislation, just letting the General Assembly know that the Board of Education in Cobb County is in support of this. I'm not going to read the entire whereases, but basically it's therefore the Board of Education of Cobb County supports Edna's Law as it's being presented. So be happy to answer any questions. This we would need now. Clem, help me if I get off the rails here. I've been known to leave the reservation every now and again. I would think that we would need a motion and probably a second to place or to take action, or help me, Clem. I'm phoning a friend.
Well, we can do it now, or you can also just wait till you vote on the agenda later to place it on there.
If we can do it now, that's kind of where I stopped and said I'm phoning a friend because I wasn't going to throw that out there. So if we could do it now, it'd be awesome.
Doesn't it take a 100% for 100% of the vote to put it on the agenda?
No, I don't think so. I think you would need the chair or 3 members. But remember, y'all haven't voted on the agenda yet, so you're just in a work session phase, which is why I said you could do it now or later. We're in that sort of weird place because we're only into the work session.
Ms. Thayer.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what we need to do or how we need to do it, but I think this, we appreciate our representative taking this step, and we appreciate Ms. Edna's dedication to our children, and so dearly respect the life that was given here, that I would like to move whatever we need to do to make this resolution possible. So
Just format the motion.
I move that we accept this resolution and support this as a board.
Mr. Skimhorn, second. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ragsdale, is this, I assume, was all ready to go for our signatures once we vote on it?
Yeah, that's kind of why I was scurrying around a little bit. I knew that it was in your notebook. I don't know if we have one that requires all 7 signatures or if it's just the chair or, okay, so the board chair will sign it after the vote of the board.
Generally, all 7 members are those that.
We can reprint it, yeah. Let's just go ahead and do that. So pending board approval, we will get it printed up with all 7 board members' names on it before tonight.
Okay.
So we can get you to sign it before you leave.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no objections, that go on consent?
We'll just take a vote now.
All right. Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
I appreciate that. And I know Representative Thomas does as well. It just helps move that along. Okay, now, getting back to order. Agenda item number 1 is the monthly authorization of school properties disposable per district administrative rule DO-R, and that list has been sent to you electronically.
I have a motion for consent.
Without objection.
Okay, if there's no objection, we go to consent.
Okay.
Consent.
Agenda item number 2, I'm going to ask Mr. Darrell York to come up here for the presentation. Let me just go ahead and kind of give a little bit of intro. That all of these policies are listed here under the one agenda item because it's all covered under the necessity to change these, modify these policies per the new board meetings calendar. So that's why they're all listed here. I've talked to several of you, and we can discuss these individually and also vote on these individually as well if that desire is there from the board. So, Mr. York, I'll ask you to just kind of go through each one, and then we can discuss them individually.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board, agenda item number 2 is a recommendation for adoptions of revision of various board policies as the superintendent has outlined. During the review period before today's meeting, we did get some feedback specifically in writing from Mr. Sweeney. So I put an extra copy of policy BC at your desk for you to review the changes that he suggested. Otherwise, I'm here to answer any questions you would have.
So kind of just take us one by one each policy,
Sure.
and then we'll have discussion, if that's okay with the board, on each policy as we get to each one.
Yes, sir. Policy BB, internal organization, deals with really conforming language regarding the meeting that we have the first week of January, where we set the board calendar for the year. Policy BC deals with the board meetings. Again, the bulk of the changes there come from having a single day of meeting. We've termed them a work session and a voting session, so we've changed some language there. We've also changed language dealing with some of the just deadlines of when things have to be turned in order to make the agenda. Mr. Sweeney also had, and sir, if you wanted to comment on the, I guess specifically the 3031 line change.
Well,
that you
let's
had.
just do a brief description of
Yes,
each
sir.
one,
All right.
and then we'll come back to each one and have discussion
Yes, sir.
on each one there.
BCBI is regarding public participation in board meetings. Again, since we're working on meetings, this was a good time to clarify some language there dealing with the time limit of speaking. BD is policy development. The changes there have to deal with the timeline that those have to be presented to you. And then AC, we took this opportunity also to realign our vision and mission and update those. And that's all.
Now, back to BB. So again, so that was just a brief description of each policy. And so now we can go through each one and highlight the changes and have any discussion on any additional changes that we want to make.
Mr. Scamhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, we've not had a chance to see, and I respect the fact that Mr. Sweeney has hopefully some good suggestions, but I've not had an opportunity to look at those. And so Mr. Sweeney submitted changes on 2 different policies?
Just one.
Just one.
BC.
I thought I heard you say that he submitted on 2. Okay, I stand corrected there. Could you point out fairly quickly the changes he submitted on the one that you put on the?
Sure. Do we want to go ahead and move from BB
I'll wait.
to BC?
I thought I'll wait. Oh. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Yeah, let's proceed 1, 2, 3, 4, and be done with them. So we're on number 1. Policy BB.
BB looks good to me.
Anybody have any discussion?
We're going to split these out.
Yes.
We're on BB now.
Each one's going to be voted on.
We're going to vote on each one?
I'm good with that. We vote on each one, then we can put them all together if they all pass. Right. But we're going to one at a time, and then if we get through all of them, then they can go, if we get them right, we put them on consent.
Need to vote, change it, or split them out.
Each one? Mr. Scamhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that we're going to vote on each one separately. Is that correct? After each one, we'll have a discussion? Okay. So previously was just an overview for having an overview, I guess.
That's my understanding, is he just put them all out there. Now we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4.
So do you need a motion for us to split
So
it out?
we have a motion to do number 1. We're discussing. Right. Okay.
Well, BB looks good to me. Sorry.
I was going to say, BB's fine with me also.
All right.
Okay, let's take a vote.
No, we're not going to vote. We're going to work. We're working. We'll vote tonight. We're working.
All right.
Would you wish to put BC on consent?
BB.
Excuse me, BB.
Yes. Let's go to number 2. BC. I'm good with that. I want to take a 10-minute break till 4:43.
Yes, sir.
We're recessed. Thank you. We're back with agenda item 2 discussion. Policy BC. Any comments?
Yes, sir. Policy BC deals with board meetings. Specifically, it defines how we set the agenda, when those have to be published to you, moving to only one meeting date a month, required that we make some adjustments to that.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, and then during the review period, I submitted some small changes, and you should have that copy in front of you. Line 25 is just changing the word meeting to session. Session is the word that's used predominantly throughout this policy, so it was for consistency. I'll come back to line 30 and 31 in just a moment. Line 93, again, it was just changing that to sessions. Line 99 is reducing that just to the word board. And then inserting the word board at line 136. So those are all minor grammatical changes more than anything else. Back to 3031, the way that it read says new items should not be placed on the agenda following the conclusion of the agenda work session without the unanimous consent of the board. What I saw in this was a potential violation of a notice, or I should say a notice violation. The issue is that the public is entitled to having notice of agenda items that we are taking action upon. And so if we're sitting here at a work session and then all of a sudden we decide to throw something brand new on the agenda and then we take a vote for it that evening, we're not providing adequate notice. And so hence the reason to strike this. Now I will say that if there was something that was extraordinarily pressing and then there was an emergency, you still have a fallback position. For example, the chair still has the provision to call an emergency meeting with 4 hours notice, and then also a special meeting with 24 hours notice. So there's different provisions in the event there's something that the board has to act upon quickly. But if we were to throw something onto the agenda and vote on it during that session, I think we would be in violation of a notice, or a notice violation, rather. Any questions?
This language made more sense when we had 2 weeks between meetings, but now that you only have 2 hours between meetings, it makes sense to strike that.
Okay. Pardon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions on Mr. Sweeney's, and those were good catches, by the way, as I mentioned before. I do have something I would like to bring up, though, if that's appropriate. It's a works, okay. On line 8, in order to be consistent with the following paragraph after in section A, for the board to consider is change the recommended 4 board members to 3. And if you look at in line 16 and line 21, that already has in the current policy 3 board members and 3 board members. And changing that to that proposed 4 back, or not back to 3, but to 3 would be more consistent. I'm not suggesting that we should accept that per se, but I think that would be more applicable. So, and then Ms. Thayer, did you want to? Okay, thank you. I'm willing to go back and forth if you want. Let's see. Oh, back. On line 16, the first beginning of the sentence there where it says any items, I believe that should be any item or items, or just start it with a capital I, items. I don't know, Mr. York, if you
All right, sir.
concur with that. It's been a while since I've had language arts, English. If there's no objections there, then, yes, sir.
I have a question on exactly what are you saying here about this?
It's a grammatical thing where any items which can be changed, it should be any item or items, because there could be a singular item or items.
Okay.
I mean,
so what do you see? How do you see changes being made?
Delete any and just put.
Well, I'm talking about who would make the change. Would it be a board member that makes the change, or superintendent, or
Well, this is new. It's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not clear.
Somewhere we come to a consensus. So as we go through these changes, I assume if somebody objects, we can discuss it there. Is that correct, Mr. Parliamentarian? So if there's any objections to that, and Mr. Darrell, Mr. York, I assume will be the arbiter of if you concur.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as that language, making the change to that language, yes, sir, that's not a problem.
Okay. Are you, Mr. Banks, are you okay with that?
Well, what I was going to say is any item or items.
Yes, sir. Or actually, you can just put the S in a parentheses there, so that the term is any.
I would just recommend that you say items and just delete the word any.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do we have to clarify submitted by? Who?
That's covered in the preceding sentence. So in the preceding sentence, the work session agenda shall be closed to board member 5 day chairman agenda prep unless the addition of a late item is approved by the chair or 3 board members. So if an item is put forth by the chair or 3 board members, then any item that's changed or added within 2 business days before chairman agenda prep will be accompanied by the explanation. So it's the late items added by 3 board members or the chair.
Or it could be an existing agenda item. It could be changed by a board member, chair, or a superintendent. Because you're saying items, so that could be anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm thinking that if there was something, let's say there was an agenda item that you had posted for the public and the board, and then for some reason a paragraph or a sentence needed to be changed because something was caught, then would you republish the agenda with the explanation if it was less than 2 days before?
Yeah, but my understanding of this sentence is that it doesn't relate to who is creating the agenda item. It is relating to the fact that board members need to know why an agenda item is being added so soon before a board meeting. So it really is just an internal notice. There's external notice requirements that Mr. Sweeney referenced under the open meetings laws, but this one is more to just let board members know why is this getting sprung on us. There needs to be a good reason for that.
Do we need to delete the term changed? Because I kind of agree that is providing and injecting confusion where I don't think it's necessary. Because this is referring to an item that's added late by the chair or 3 board members. So I think we could just delete changed.
Well, I don't know. It was there initially because an item might have been there, but it just turned into a totally different item. It's still 1.01 purchase of textbooks, but it's something totally different than it used to be. It is probably why that word has been there.
I agree, but if you think about it, any item can be changed by amending it during the session. So the word changed really is irrelevant.
And you make another good point. I think our board is alone in Metro Atlanta in having very detailed policies like this. And so keep in mind, I don't mean to to bring us all down, but you as a board can undo everything we're talking about here when you vote as a majority, because a majority of the board can undo the policy when they set the agenda. You just have to follow the open meetings laws, the state laws. So these two paragraphs should give us a very kind of an organized way of approaching each month and whatever protections you have in store. But ultimately, as you all know, the majority of the board governs, and it is the board's agenda, not any individual, not 3 members. It's the whole board's agenda. And so that's not to take away from what we're doing now. You're just going to have times where you have to do different things, and I'm not sure you're going to have a policy that's going to cover every scenario, no matter how hard we try.
Is it the superintendent's wish to delete changed? Or?
This is totally up to the board. My wishes don't weigh in here. I was trying to reduce any confusion, because it seemed like, that we were, now I'm adding more by trying to talk about it. So I don't know.
Ms. Thayer?
I give up.
I make a motion that we accept the policy that Mr. Sweeney presented to us with the changes that he made, changing the 4 to 3, as Mr. Scammahorn recommended, and leaving the other thing as it is.
I like it.
And then putting this on the consent agenda.
Leaving the word any in there?
It's fine to me. It all says the same thing, yes.
I was under misunderstanding that they were going to delete any. Mr. Scammahorn.
I just have a question. As the work session, I thought we were trying to wordsmith this to get us to a voting spot. I mean, I don't object to what Ms. Thayer is saying. I'm confused now. Where are we? Are we wordsmithing so that in the voting session we can vote on this? Or are we going to vote on this now?
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe the next thing to do is just hit the pause button and see if there's any other wordsmithing suggestions from the board. And then we will need to move to put it somewhere on the agenda for the night meeting.
Good with that. Well,
I'm ambivalent.
I meant even beyond that. I mean, is that the last item we have to discuss?
I have another question. We were striking abstentions on line 130. Does that mean that we have to vote yes or no now? We cannot abstain?
If I may, no, sir. That simply striking that language is about how we count abstentions. By striking this change here, you're simply going to now refer back to state law and Robert's rules.
Which
abstentions don't count for the majority of the votes cast.
Okay, so they're a standalone item now.
You can still abstain.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Then,
Mr. Chairman. Oh, go ahead.
No,
You got some other items on here?
no, go ahead.
Can we go through this thing and summarize what we've changed?
Mr. Sweeney?
All right. So it's my understanding then, and this is what I would propose we put on consent, is line 8, we're changing the word 4 to 3.
Okay.
Okay. And then the changes that are noted in the copy that you have that I recommended, and be done with it. Consent?
What was your last one?
Just those two changes.
That you need, anybody wants to look at her before we put it there? Okay.
Goes on consent with those changes.
Correct.
Okay.
Now we're going to go on to the next one.
Policy BCBI is regarding public participation in board meetings.
I don't have any questions.
Anybody have any? Mr. Scamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On line 50 and 51,
Yes, sir.
I don't know that I would leave it exactly there, but I'm suggesting that that be reworded so that at the, whoever the chair is, that at their discretion, that additional time could be allocated before the meeting or after the meeting. But to, take that out makes it very concrete. And if we left it in somewhere, you put, instead of at the board's discretion, but at the chair's discretion, the board may make additional time, pick a number available for public comment, and then period, and striking out immediately following the board meeting. I just wanted to see if there was any discussion where we need some latitude for additional public comment, not regularly necessarily.
Mr. Banks?
Why do you put the language in there that it, no longer than an hour for the whole thing? That way, if it takes 10 minutes, it takes 10 minutes. If it takes 40 minutes, it takes 40 minutes. But no more than an hour.
I have no objection to that if I understand what Mr. Banks is saying, but I would maybe suggest regularly 30 minutes with a potential of adding 30 minutes if needed for some, like one time we had 100 people in here for textbook issues, about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I would want to cut that off arbitrarily at 30 minutes.
What would be any objection to just leaving it, instead of striking it, just leave it as is?
Well, it says immediately following board meeting, so I don't know who would be here after the board meeting. It could be. I'm saying at the chair's discretion. So,
if I can add too, under the current policy, you would have up to an hour and 15 minutes for public comment, because if 5 minutes were given to each speaker and maximum of 15 speakers, that'd be an hour and 15 minutes, I think. And so, but the other thing I wanted to say, I'm not sure exactly, I can't remember why this was done the way it is done, except that it makes sense because y'all rarely do public comment after board meetings. That's just not something that has been done in the last few years. And remember, the board has the ability to be flexible. So even though the policy, we're striking things, and that's an example. If you had 100 people, or that's a huge number, but if you just needed to do something, the board has the ability to do that. And the board has done that no matter what we say in the policy.
So you could have 100 people out there, and the chairman could give them each 3 minutes, and they could
The
be
chairman could not, but the board could.
there. Okay.
Yes, if I
think
may,
Mr. Morgan did that one time. He made a point to the chair, and it was voted that way.
if I could point out, line 10 does limit public comment to 30 minutes.
That's what I was going to say.
But as Mr. Doyle pointed out, at any given time, the board can make an adjustment to that as needed.
Let's do that then. Mr. Sweeney.
Yeah, and then just, this, I guess, is more of a technical thing. So if you're looking at line 51, and it says available for public comment immediately following the board meeting, that's kind of suggesting the board meeting has been adjourned.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
you know, so, I mean, there's a reason for striking this. I mean, you know, we really shouldn't be sitting up here impaneled if the board meeting's adjourned. So I think with the flexibility that the board can issue itself or act on itself, I think we're covered.
Okay. Mr. Banks?
Let's say that we had the 30 minutes, that we've used the 30 minutes. What would be the process that the board would have to take to extend that? Would we have to vote? Or
A vote, or the chair could say, without objection, here's what we'll do.
Yeah, we've done that in the past.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand the procedure that we'd have to follow in order to allocate additional time to additional speakers. The way we've kind of controlled that is how long could they talk. We've gone down to 1 minute before, and generally it's 2 minutes, but if we go 5 minutes, different story. So, do we just leave it to the board to make that decision?
The chair. And then the board can override.
Yeah.
Mr. Cameron.
And if I didn't misunderstand Mr. Sweeney, I've not proposed that we leave that in there. I'm proposing that we reword it and look at it differently, but if Mr. Doyle's, but Mr. Doyle's correct, if we can do whatever we need to do, I'm fine for taking it out.
Strike it. Mr. Sweeney.
Yeah, well, what I understand is that the policy already says you really first of all, the board has the ability to suspend its rules at any given time. Okay, and so in this instance, if there was a recommendation and there was a majority of us that wanted to extend more time, we could certainly do that. Secondly, is that this has flexibility. It says a 30-minute period, but as council pointed out, you know, we also have a provision that says people can speak up to 5 minutes at the discretion of the chair. Well, if you make that decision and we've got more people than it's going to take 30 minutes, I mean, so I think there's some flexibility in here. I think the cap right now is at 30 minutes. As the chairperson, you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to go beyond 30 minutes or not by the number that's allotted. And I think we're covered with regard to things, and you know, we'll be able to figure it out.
Okay. Mr. Scamahorn.
One other change or suggestion. When I read paragraph 8, the following, starting on 55, it starts out, individuals will not be denied the opportunity to address, I had to read it twice in order to catch, well, as I was reading down through there, subparagraphs 1, 2, and 3, I thought, whoa, that's not jiving with the topic sentence. And so when I reread it, I caught there just before the colon, commentary will not be permitted if. And my suggestion is that we either cap and bold not, or boldface it, or make another paragraph where they will not be permitted the opportunity to address the board if, and then the following. And Mr. Doyle, I yield to you on suggestions or.
Just bring attention to not.
Yes, yes. Is that acceptable? And thank you all. That's all the changes on that one.
Any other changes or questions or discussion on this? BD. Next.
All right, sir. Next is BD, Policy Development. This is really a conforming change. in dealing with the timeline for submission of policy changes like we're working with tonight to meet the agenda deadline for the single-day meetings.
I have a question. You go back to BC and read about the proposed agenda. We're talking about the entire agenda, okay? So are we saying that this is different than the items labeled agenda items like 1, 2, and 3? I mean, when I read through this, I read, my question to myself were, are these to be agenda items, can't be discussed for gathering info unless it's an agenda item?
Yes, sir. Policy changes are normally handled the same as any other voting agenda item, discussed at the work session, voted on at the evening session. And so this is just conforming language that will say, based upon all the changes we made in BC on how we submit agenda items, we'll do the same thing for board policy.
So you're going to change your method of giving us a 10-day thing, like at the bottom of even this one, like number 7, it says administrative rule modifications.
No, sir. The 10-day rule is about administrative rules, and there's a difference between an administrative rule and a board policy. So board policies are handled as any other action item. Okay. As far as administrative rules, we'll talk about that when we get to the administrative rule piece today. But you're still going to get that in your same packet for review prior to the work session.
Okay. Thank you. You just straightened it out for me. I got my rules and my policies.
Yes, sir.
Kind of intermingled. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Skimhorn. Consent, if there's no objection. Next.
All right, so I even hate to say this, but I just want to make sure we're all good. So with all of the policy modifications that's been discussed, all 4 are good for consent with the modifications discussed, correct?
That's my understanding.
What?
Here's one more.
AC. Well, I was just testing you, see if you're paying attention. Obviously, I was not. Exactly, yeah.
You were just doing the B policy.
Yeah, exactly.
The final policy adjustment is policy AC on the district organization plan. And this is just a revision to the vision and mission. As we know, our mission, one team, one goal, student success. The leadership team has looked at what our vision is as a district, has recommended a school district of excellence where all students succeed. So this is a matter of just aligning those two, our vision and our mission.
Anybody? Consent? All right, we can live with that one.
Thank you.
Okay. Now that I'm back paying attention and back in the game here. Yeah, exactly. Agenda item number 3 is the recommendation for approval to renew the contract with Ombudsman. I'm going to ask Alice Stouter to come and present this agenda item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Superintendent. I bring you agenda item number 3, recommendation for approval to renew the contract with Ombudsman Alternative Education Provider. Since 2008, the Cobb County School District has contracted with the Ombudsman for services to middle and high school students, including students with disabilities who have been suspended for 10 days or more or expelled. In 2013, the contract was amended for 1 year with the option to renew up to 4 additional years. The superintendent's recommendation is to provide the Ombudsman contract renewal for an additional year for a contract period of July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
Any discussion? Mr. Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have multiple locations for Ombudsman?
Yes, sir, we have 4.
Okay. So this $2 million is it pretty much spread evenly, or is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have 285 seats between the 4 locations.
Okay. What percentage of those are filled?
Most of the time, all of those seats are full.
Okay. That's alarming. Thank you.
Ms. Stouter, this is a 1-year extension, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scamahorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we track any, do we have complaints? Do we track the complaints, or like if parents say, I think we have 5 locations, correct?
We have 4 locations, and yes, sir, we do follow up. Parents contact us just like they would any school facility, and we follow up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Ms. Thayer?
Thanks. I do have a question. With the talk that we have about changing Oakwood, how will this play in, since we're renewing this for a year? We're hoping Oakwood will be up and running in less than a year.
That's correct. So we are not renewing the Oakwood digital contract for the new school.
Okay. But we will continue to run this program because this part of it will not be a part of Oakwood.
That's correct.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing the services that Ombudsman provides the district, it's not an easy task. You're getting children that we want to get back on track for a plethora of reasons. So how do we gauge them as being successful? What do we say, you know what, this makes them successful, this is, constructive stabilizing force within our district? What measures or metrics do we gauge for Ombudsman? Again, knowing that it's not easy. Kids coming to you, discipline issues or a lot of different things.
Right, and the contract is very extensive, and they do assure us that they will keep students on track for graduation, and we have employees who help monitor that also.
Okay, so I want to make sure I heard this correctly. So basically, the big to-do for Ombudsman is keeping little Johnny on track to graduate, and we monitor the success rate in which they keep kids on track to graduate.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Scamahorn?
Have we ever recently, anyway, have we done a cost analysis between running, when we had Central Alternative School and Ombudsman now?
Ongoing. I was not in the decision, but I was in the district when we went with Ombudsman. And it was a significant cost savings to the district to go with Ombudsman. We are continually evaluating, both the service and the cost, because there's an argument for you get what you pay for, in quality versus quantity. So we are continually evaluating that. We won't say that we'll be with Ombudsman forever, but we won't say that we're ready to pull the trigger to bring everything back in-house either. We want to make sure that it's the best decision for students, but also it makes good financial sense for the district, because again, we continually have to look at our budget to make sure that we're in line with revenues and expenditures, and we have to prioritize. So the short answer, that's not really short, but is that we're continually evaluating that process.
Just a follow-on is, don't misunderstand, I'm not looking for taking the cheapest, because, again, as a teacher at Central Alternative for 2 years, when we were in the south part of the county, when they came from Walton or North Cobb, they were upset by the time they got through riding an hour down there and an hour back, plus it shortened the school day. So having multiple locations is a great advantage to the service of our students. So I want to make that very clear. So thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Ms. Stoddard.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm going to go ahead and call Daryl back up for the administrative rules, but I just want to make sure that we're straight on the consent, that all 4 items are on consent, correct? Okay.
Agenda item 2, correct.
4. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
On agenda item 2, yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking about all agenda items.
Okay.
Are on the consent. Yes.
Got it.
Okay. All right, Mr. York.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board, you've had 3 administrative rules to review since the agenda came out. Hopefully I can make this one a little easier than the other. If you have any questions about those 3. Thank you.
All right, so they're all consent now. All right, next we have approval of the agenda. If there's no objection, our agenda is approved. And next we have executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session for permitted personnel, land, and legal matters? Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Chastain, second. All in favor? Ms. Thayer, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. I'm passing.
That would be 7-0 unanimous. And we will now recess to executive session and return at 7 o'clock for our working session.
All right, so if we can, we got to